Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, Milo?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, and children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. Were you rested in your cradle of power? You were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Forgive me. I did not sin. I have failed you all.
You will bring me. Captain Armor, I do not know what strength is in my net. But I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall. Our people failed. Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.
Hey guys, welcome to The Narrative, episode 38, The Sovereign World. Another one I didn't really know what to name, but I figure with my returning guest tonight, the broader we are, the more of the battle space we leave ourselves to weave. I am out of sorts. We are north of the wall, north of the ice wall, and my dog is being a total asshole, to be honest. Wolf Bright. So if anybody wants a wolf, he's never been this much of a dickhead, actually. I don't know if it's because we have a baby now. So that's what we're dealing with. That's kind of a mood. That's the kind of mood I'm in. And Ghost is going to pull me out of it tonight. He's going to pull all of us out of it. We are going to basically continue our conversation from last week on the Sovereign Alliance. That was called the Sovereign War. We focused a lot on Russia, China, and India. The Tianjin Summit, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, sort of some of the pincers we think have been going on between Trump, Putin, and Xi, and Modi and others. Tonight, we want to focus on sort of the Western Hemisphere. We're going to focus a bit on the West, NATO, on our way westward from China and Russia. We're going to focus on the U.S., specifically with the cartel situation. And fortunately, I mean, I was going to say, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess the Charlie Kirk situation is being used, it looks like, as a exposure type of op of some of the stuff we were going to talk about tonight anyway, at least a couple hops removed from what we're going to talk about. So we're actually going to lead with some Charlie Kirk developments here and sort of our take on the larger web that's being painted. When I say it's being used to expose things, I'm not suggesting that that's part of the plan. It just looks like patriots, the FBI, the DOJ are clearly already shifting the narrative pretty sharply with the whole Charlie Kirk situation away from random lone wolf. They are not allowing the lone wolf narrative to settle at all, which I think is good. And on Wednesday night, John and I had kind of called for that and hoped that they would not treat this situation with kid gloves, and it looks like they are not. If anything is messed up tonight in terms of internet or whatever, I apologize, or audio, but hopefully you guys can hear me and you know, we can get through this with subpar setup. Otherwise, we're going to do, I'm going to bring Ghost on after we do our sponsors tonight. And as always, you guys are the third part of the show. You send in Rumble rants. We're going to get to those at the end. I've got some Badlands boosts from last week. If you want to support the show that way, you can go to badlandsmedia.tv/boost, select the narrative, and either ask a question or just shoot over some support. We either get that this week or next week if it's comes in after the show. Otherwise, tonight's show is brought to you by a couple of sponsors, starting with our friends at My Fireside. Welcome to My Fireside, proudly American-made fire pits crafted from 100% heavy-gauge stainless steel for unmatched durability, fully customizable with interchangeable plates. They're built to last. Unlike competitors' closed-box designs, their fire pits deliver 360 degrees of radiant heat for everyone to enjoy. As a veteran-owned and operated company, they even include a free pocket Declaration of Independence and Constitution with every order. Plus, a portion of each purchase supports the Semper Fi America's Fund. Get yours today. Experience the warmth of freedom at badlandsmedia.tv/fire. That's badlandsmedia.tv/fire. As many of you know, I have a My Fireside fire pit. I've got the big boy, and I bought this 2 years ago before we had any connection with these guys. So we strongly believe in them. They strongly believe in America First companies. They are an America First company. If you want a badass fire pit, and fall's the best season for it. We all know that, right? Put the game on through the sliding door or something like that, the screen door. Go out and have a fire. And our other sponsor tonight are our friends at River Bitcoin. Ready to stack sats? River's got your back because they're Bitcoin only, built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. With River, you get 0-fee recurring buys, set it and forget it every hour, day, week, or month to grow your Bitcoin effortlessly. FDI insured, no minimums, no hidden fees, and withdraw anytime to supercharge your savings. US-based human support from an expert client services team, plus private client services for buys over $100,000, if any of you are high rollers in the chat. Business accounts to invest in Bitcoin, strengthen your balance sheet, and earn a 3.8% interest paid in Bitcoin, fueling your next big move. Best-in-class wallet for easy sending, receiving, and managing your Bitcoin on one secure platform, and tons more, like free educational resources from Bitcoin basics to advanced strategies. This is unmatched security, full reserve custody, no lending your Bitcoin, multi-sig cold storage, and verifiable proof of reserves. Big thing in the Bitcoin community. For total peace of mind, start now at badlandsmedia.tv/river. Move your cash to River and earn real returns with Bitcoin. The future starts today. badlandsmedia.tv/river. All right. Much appreciate our sponsors tonight. And without further ado, I'll bring in the returning guest from last week, the ghost of Base Patrick Henry. How's it going, Ghost? How's your dog being?
My dogs aren't they're not being dickheads right now, but they actually are notorious for being dickheads. Just
to everyone in the neighborhood. They're very sweet, but when you put them outside, despite being like 10 years old, they just bark nonstop because they like hear the neighbor's dogs. So I sympathize.
Yeah, man. But, we got rugged by the dog because he has been here like half a dozen times, and there is another dog here, and he's been fine. And for some reason, on this visit, he is terrible. He's barking the whole time. He's hyper. I don't know what's going on. He's acting out. Maybe it's the baby situation, but geez, never again.
Yeah. Well, I think I have a trick here. And by the way, you mentioned if you're VIPs, everybody or a high roller, everybody in this audience is a VIP. So
that's true.
We're all motherfucking VIPs in this audience. So
not all of us are high rollers, but that's a secondary concern.
That's true. That's very true. But my trick here is, you mentioned something on Wednesday with John. I made a note of it in the chat, but last week I had asked if we could talk about Tolkien. We're probably not going to be able to.
I know we have to do a show on that.
There's just there's too much happening. Like you and I are not going to be able to talk about Tolkien, which is hilarious that Burning Bright is being like, no, we don't come to talk about Tolkien 2 weeks in a row.
It's because I know that the power level is going to go too high if we do that.
Yeah.
And I'm not in my setup. We can't go Tolkien when I'm not in the right headspace.
But you made a comment that I just want to note real quick, where you said it feels like we're the hobbits and like we are in way over our heads, and it's like we have no business being in a war that's operating at these levels. That is exactly what I wanted to talk about. Like when I was like, hey, we should talk about Tolkien, I've been thinking about stuff.
Yeah.
And like that is exactly what I was thinking too. So there's definitely like a hive mind thing happening.
Yeah, so let's start with Charlie Kirk. I mean, you guys have obviously, if you've been listening to the Badlands, to anybody out there, it's one of the biggest topics in years. You've been inundated with everybody's opinions on it. You've got opinions on it. I think a lot of it has been us just reacting to it. Horrible situation, obviously, in many different ways. There's the immediate tragedy. And then there's all the implications of it. And to Ghost's point there about, being kind of small, feeling small in an info war, this is one of those weeks that even for info war kind of veterans, like all of you guys in the chat, I think it was, I keep using the word jarring, because opinions on Patriot control and Patriot plans obviously vary very widely, both at Badlands and in the truth community at large. But most of us do engage with some level of there are Patriot plans, moves and counter moves, and overall, I would say that most of us feel that the quote unquote Patriots are in the advantaged position. Some think, comically so, to the point where, and I've kind of trended there at times. We talk about the Sovereign Alliance. I think that they are kind of firmly in control of where things are going at an end state. I think the reason the Charlie Kirk situation is so jarring is because it's one of those kind of paradigm shattering moments, not just in the macro landscape, political, social, cultural, all of that, but in the truth community in particular. I think it's one of those things where you go, well, if you were mapping things on a certain paradigm of full control, watching a movie, this is a week where you've basically got a choice to make. You either go, and I'm not even trying to throw stones, I'm saying if people earnestly feel that way, which I did years ago, you've kind of been presented a choice here, which is that you either can still commit to that, in which case you have to start having some more difficult conversations, I think, with yourself about what Patriot control and movie means and whether or not that is moral, right? If you're in the Patriot control camp this week, you're either saying Charlie Kirk didn't die, which seems extremely difficult to keep that kind of a thing going in perpetuity, or you think he did, and that somehow it's part of the movie, etc. I mean, I think that paradigm has had a rough week, but I think even the paradigm most of us kind of engage with, which is that Patriots may be in situational, tactical control, but the enemy gets a vote. I still think this week was jarring for a lot of people because it's like, oh, they are maybe a little bit more kinetic and a little bit more, they've got some power projection capabilities here, or chaos causing capabilities that perhaps a lot of us underestimated. So I think even besides the Charlie Kirk tragedy, there's a little bit of unsettlement coming off of that, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you know, I mean, I fall firmly in the camp that Charlie Kirk is dead. But for those who indulge the idea that he's not, I think it's one of those things that if for any reason he wasn't, that's something you're never going to learn, because they're never going to walk him back out on stage and be like, take a bow, because that would undo whatever comes next, right? It's just one of those things where it would be such a demonstration of depravity in like on like the public psyche, that I just don't think if you want to indulge that rabbit hole, that is a possibility. I don't think it's something that's ever going to be revealed. So for the sake of the public's knowledge and narrative, he's dead, and that character is not coming back. No matter how you want to engage with what actually happened.
You know, that's a good way to put it, because I made this argument several years ago about the Joe Biden, how many Joe Bidens are there conversations, because people kind of got annoyed at me because I was belittling that the earlobes conversation. The funny thing is, I'm willing to engage psychologically, mentally, with a lot of wild theories. I do understand that to get into the truth community in the first place, or recognize that there is one, you have to understand and fathom that you've been lied to about foundational aspects of basically everything, right? But my point at that time was the same one you just made about the Charlie Kirk situation. Even if I steel man the argument of the Biden clones and how many Hillary Clintons are we looking at, people who go down those rabbit holes are not helping us. And I'm not saying that by saying that they're making us look silly. I don't think normies think what they think about this community anyway. But I think more to your point, you are wasting your time, because if you are right about the Biden clones and the mask and the Hillary clones and body doubles and Charlie Kirk and all this kind of stuff, the problem with that is exactly what Ghost points out. If you acknowledge that there is this patriot awakening plan and truth plan, by definition, they would never disclose that kind of thing. And if they ever did, it would fairly undo a lot of what they did. I mean, and Chris Paul talks about this quite a bit, as does John. It would be immoral, right? And you might, I'm not even talking about the whole like Biden the mask stuff. Maybe that is not the same degree of immorality we'd be talking about, but a mass public trauma event like this, where you supposedly kill somebody on stage that millions are looking up to,
gruesomely kill him, gruesomely. Yeah.
And even if you pantomimed that entire thing, you've just, at that point, you have gotten us into a realm where I would probably be more interested doing shows about whether or not I'm on board with the Patriots, if that's what was going on. And I was joking in chat that, you know what, guys, if that's really what Patriots are doing, and I don't, for the record, believe that that's what they're doing, then maybe our final enemy is the Patriots as the truth community, right? So, but yeah, if you have any more thoughts on that aspect of things.
No, because I agree. I think that is largely a waste of time and spinning your wheels. And, it's for people who want to feel intellectually superior because they're like, I'm not falling for it, so therefore I'm better than all of you. And it's like there are layers to I'm not falling for it. And I think that layer is a layer that just is never going to map onto reality. So therefore, it's only going to be you satisfying yourself. It's almost like intellectual masturbation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's endless too. It's an infinite loop that you've caught yourself in, where you're just going, well, it's all an act, it's all a movie, it's all whatever. One of my other arguments with the whole movie idea, taken literally, has been, well, then what's your role here? What do you do here, right? to cue the Office Space meme. What is it you do here? returning power back to the American people by Donald Trump means, as Chris Paul would say, hoodwinking them, but in good ways, for endlessly, just endlessly stretching beyond the horizon. We are now just watching good guy psyops forever. And that's how we get our sovereignty back, right? Like, at the end of it, you get a claim one sovereign coupon because you watched the movie really hard. So yeah, I don't think that's what's going on. But I do want to, we've talked about, I'm sure you've been on shows this week talking about Charlie Kirk from many different angles. So I don't want to rehash a lot of that. You guys were really supportive, the whole community coming together, which is cool to see. But I actually think that this whole Charlie Kirk aftermath is a really interesting and unexpected lead-in to some of the stuff we were going to talk about tonight, which is sovereign alliance, the sovereign war that we think is going on kind of on a global battle space. But we wanted to focus more in the West on this episode. And before we get to that in the second half of the show, the cartels, Venezuela, big stuff going on there. Ghost has some good stuff on that. I think this is all related in a macro. And we're seeing in the immediate fallout of Charlie Kirk, we're seeing the FBI and DOJ saying that, John Solomon mentioned foreign intelligence. I don't think we've seen a whole lot more of that yet. But in general, we're seeing mentions of foreign intelligence. Now we're seeing mentions of NGOs. Stephen Miller went on TV, yesterday or 2 days ago and was talking about, or Trump himself went on Fox and Friends talking about going after Soros and dark money networks. And it was in the same conversation about Charlie Kirk, but sort of a parallel conversation going on is what it feels like they're doing this week. They're saying like, man, this is left-wing extremism that's going on with Charlie Kirk. Hey, we're going to start dismantling left-wing NGOs. And also, we don't think this kid was a lone wolf. So they're pretty quickly, I would say, shifting the Overton window and saying, we are talking about these two things at the same time because these two things are highly related.
Yeah. And, this is one of those things where the conversation that Chris and John had last night was fantastic. I think the points that especially Chris was making.
I didn't catch it.
And the way that he was explaining it, in the way that Chris Paul does, was genius. And I feel like he really articulated a lot of the issues at play very, very well. So I would encourage anyone who didn't see DPH last night to go check it out. But, we've been waiting for a long time for, and I hate to put it this way because, somebody was shot, for something that was going to literally just grip everybody. And I feel like this is a situation that has gripped everybody. Every single person that I interact with, I went the other day to pick up something for my wife from one of my oldest friends, from his wife. I went to go pick it up from his house, and he came out and we just started talking. I was just planning on grabbing it and going off the porch. And one of my oldest friends, but I never talk about politics with him. Him and I are of the same mind, similar mind, but we just never talk about politics. And honestly, these days I barely see anybody anyway. But
yeah,
yeah. But he came out and he wanted to talk about it, so we talked about it for 20 minutes, right? And he was just like, man, this is like an inflection point. He's like, I hope this just really, really, changes everything and changes. I hope people just really take a step back and the left takes a step back, and the people who support that stuff just really look in the mirror. Like my wife, when I mentioned, I think in chat, that when I texted her or I called her the day of, and I was trying to warn her, do not go watch the video because I didn't want her to be traumatized by it. But I was like, did you hear what happened to Charlie Kirk? And her response was, who is Charlie Kirk? And she's a 3-time Trump voter, and she's super based when it comes to defending her first principles. But she just didn't recognize the name. When she saw the face, she texted me later and was like, I recognize the face now. But, she has been gripped by it. And she watched a Fox News special last night that aired. And I was kind of watching it over her shoulder. And I was really sickened by how quickly they put this thing together, where it's every Fox News character I could possibly think of, people who I didn't even think were in politics anymore. Tommy Loren, I thought she was like out of politics. They had brought all these people back to New York and they were doing these in-studio interviews, and they did this whole thing in like 48 hours. It was like this whole special. And it's like, and these people, the way these people were talking about Charlie, and it was clearly not like old interviews. They were talking about him in the context of him being dead. It was like he had been shot 2 years ago. Like it was like, it was
very
old
strange.
News. None of them seemed like upset. None of them seemed like emotional. Like they were just talking about it like it had happened like in the distant past. The whole thing was very, very, very bizarre. Everything about this has been bizarre, by the way.
Surreal.
Everything, like every single aspect of the Charlie Kirk, the response to the Charlie Kirk assassination has made me very uncomfortable and just gives me the creeps. I mean, frankly, like all of it. And it, like, I hope everyone else is feeling that way. It seems like everyone else is feeling that way, but it's okay to say that. I think it's okay to say I'm not comfortable with any of this. This feels like JFK all over again, like the way that they treated it. Like this feels like the way they treated the Vegas shooting. This feels like all of those things all over again. We're having something shoved down our throat. None of it makes any sense. It does not add up. And because Donald Trump is in office, and Kash Patel is the director of FBI, people are, and because of the context of like what happened, I think people are feeling pressure to consent to what they're being told, but you have no moral obligation to consent to anything right now.
I think that's well said. I didn't get to see DPH last night, but I know that they tend to beat the drum on that stance well. John and Chris do. I think that's an interesting way to put it, and I would even go a step further and say we all know, despite my earlier rant, that there are psyops. We are in an information war, and we are in a psychological war. We're in a fifth generation war. I do believe that patriots are utilizing fifth generation warfare and psyops against the enemy, and that the American people are the quote unquote target of those psyops as well. I think mileage varies in terms of what is your interpretation of a psyop, what is your interpretation of a lie. I'm one of the people who really believes that Operation Warp Speed, that Donald Trump has actually had a lot to do with the inflationary conditions and economic conditions that are going on. And when I say that, I don't blame him. It's because I think he's been accelerating. You talk about accelerationism a lot. In general, if I'm saying, okay, how do you steelman the argument, the macro argument in favor of patriot, quote unquote, patriot psyops, I can steelman that argument and say accelerationism. That is what they are doing. They are accelerating us down a timeline, a mass psychological timeline that is forcing, the way I've put it in my writing, is forcing shatter points in the collective mind. Forces a micro shatter point in individual minds. I think it forces macro shatter points. Shatter points are opportunities. How I would define a shatter point is your anecdote of your friend there. When I say the word shatter point, it doesn't mean that person has now become a truther or something like that.
Exactly.
What it means is, and I don't think it's just that they're paying attention to the narrative, because there's lots of psyops that everybody pays attention to, but it doesn't change them in some fundamental way, and it keeps them on the reservation, so to speak. But your anecdote there is an example of your friend hit a shatter point where he doesn't want to talk about this stuff. He goes about his daily life, whatever, doesn't bring it up. He's bringing it up in the context of seeing this thing take place and the narratives coming out of it, probably more specifically, and wanting to take cognitive action in his own mind and say, I need to engage with this in an active manner and talk about it to other people in an active manner. And I would say that means he's hit some sort of shatter point. So I think psyops go both ways. I think patriots wield them as well. But I think that there's a lot of moral gray area in that. We're operating in the dark by definition in this community. I mean, there's a reason we all read tea leaves, and there's a reason that Ghost builds mind maps, and I've got 50,000 documents of notes over the last 4 years in my folders, etc. It's because we don't have access directly to the information. And even if we quote unquote did have access to this stuff through official documents, we know that we are being fed those by one side in a multi-sided, multi-layered fifth generation information war. And I think it's important to recognize the sort of controlled and engineered chaos that we are in. Recognize that this week is a good example of not just, we can't predict what's going to happen because nobody predicted this. It doesn't matter that somebody's going to retroactively draw red boxes around drops to say that this was the scare event because they've said that 15 other things were the scare event, and they'll say the next thing is the scare event. Yeah. And we've all done it, but we're all kind of shooting in the dark here. But I think to Ghost's point, you can understand that is going on, but with the fallout of the Charlie Kirk situation you're describing, and that it's giving people a really weird vibe, including myself, it's not just okay to question what quote unquote patriots are feeding you in a narrative.
The government.
Yeah, the government.
Like let's just be blunt. It's the government telling you this. Yeah.
The government is telling you this. And maybe the characters, to Chris Ball's point, that you like are telling you things. And maybe they have a reason for telling you those things. I would just say that to further your point, it's not only exercising sovereignty and Americanism to make sure that you are thinking for yourself and not being guided along the whims and wiles of an information war, even by the good guys or people you think are the good guys, but it also may be the point to not do that. And that's what you can keep in your back pocket, I think, when people kind of have this fear almost of like, well, I don't want to say I'm uncomfortable with how this is being handled by people Trump has endorsed or appointed, because maybe I'll somehow be disrupting unity or the quote unquote plan. And I would argue, first of all, if you are, then it's not a very good plan and it might not be a very moral plan. Second of all, you're probably not disrupting it. In fact, you might be acting exactly in accordance with what they would actually want you to be doing, which is engaging in this stuff in a first principles manner. There's many ops within ops going on in the fallout of the Charlie Kirk situation. And I don't think that we owe anybody benefit of the doubt besides like Trump himself of saying this person definitely knows what's going on with the Charlie Kirk situation and definitely has our best interests at heart.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and by the way, Trump got set up on Friday. I mean, it felt to me like a setup when he went on Fox and Friends. He did an hour-long interview on Fox and Friends, and that was when like the headline broke, "We got him," like according to Trump. They were quoting Trump. And if you actually go and watch the interview and listen to what Trump says, well, like a few minutes before we went live, I got a phone call saying that because the Fox News people were like, the Fox and Friends people, Brian Kilmeade was like, oh, we understand that you have apprehended the suspect. And Trump said, well, I got a phone call a few minutes before we went live, and I have to say this to cover our ass because we don't know yet, but sounds like high degree of confidence it's the guy, but I don't know anything yet. Like this was told to me minutes before we went live. And then like if you keep watching the interview, Brian Kilmeade is sitting there doing what I think is called in court, like leading the witness. Like he's sitting there asking these very leading questions like, well, why do you hate Putin? Like, why is Putin a problem? Explain to us why Putin is a problem and why you hate him.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
you could see Trump sidestepping it and walking it back and defending Putin. And Kilmeade was like gnashing his teeth, like getting angry because Trump was not giving him the soundbite he wanted to get. But the point is they ran with the headline that it was Trump telling you that we got him, and they were basically piggybacking off of Trump's credibility to sell it to MAGA that this is the guy. When Trump was in the interview was saying, I don't know, like I don't know anything yet. They'll probably come out and do a press conference later. I don't know anything though. So it sounds like that I was told that it's a high degree of confidence that it's the guy. But you have to remember that the FBI did the Vegas shooting under Trump's administration. Like that was Trump's FBI who did it, remember? And for those who like get nervous because it's Kash Patel's the director, go listen to Steve Bannon's show from yesterday. I highly encourage everyone to go listen to the War Room from the Saturday episode of War Room. Steve Bannon, he says, look, Kash Patel is not only my colleague, one of my close friends, he's my brother. Like we are very, very close. But he said, I'm not buying anything that these people are saying. And he said, and I'm not certain that Kash isn't under some sort of pressure basically to keep his mouth shut and not disclose what actually needs to be disclosed. So that's coming from Steve Bannon. So Steve Bannon is giving you social permission to take everything they're saying and put it in a box and just push the box aside and be like, I don't know, and be skeptical and not just drink whatever Kool-Aid they're handing over to you.
Well, it's a really interesting anecdote to pull out with Trump on Fox and Friends, and it goes to a word I use all the time and a word that John uses a lot. He wrote about it in the Devolution series in the context of the Rich Higgins memo, and that is the idea we're all familiar with, or the reality that Donald Trump is operating in a battle space that has been largely created by the quote-unquote left. He exists within a certain informational and psychological battle space. And I think that, we've certainly tried to do our part in the education on this topic, and in educating ourselves on this topic. And I think our audience is way ahead of the curve there. But on applying the word battle space, media battle space, narrative, and psychological battle space to the Republicans and the conservatives and the talking heads on that side of it. And I think it's really, your Fox and Friends anecdote there, that this is a good lesson where we're speculating on what Trump was trying to do there. Maybe it's informed speculation. We're speculating on what we think they were trying to do in those interviews. But I think your point is worth ruminating on, because if you go into every Donald Trump interview or appearance with the word battle space in your mind, I think it will make you look at that interview and look at Trump's comments differently, right? If you, for example, if Trump goes and sits down with 60 Minutes, everyone in this audience, including Trump himself, probably has their kind of phasers set to stun. They've got their shields up, and they can immediately pick out what you just described, the pattern of behavior of the host, right? If you're watching 60 Minutes or CNN, we can all pick it out immediately. Oh, I see where they're trying to go with this. They're trying to say Putin bad. They're trying to talk about domestic terrorism, all this kind of stuff, right? But some people do not apply that when he goes on Fox, because we like the Fox people and they say nice things about us. Maybe some of them are reformed and are good guys or something like that. It's possible. They've certainly pushed the battle space in good directions at times. But if you go in with that mindset of when Trump is sitting down on that couch on Fox and Friends, he may be dealing with enemy psychological combatants and informational combatants. He may not be, but he may be. And if you go into that with that mentality, I think it is a much healthier mentality to approach his communications. And to Ghost's point, you may notice some things that seem a little odd or inconsistent and say, you know what, actually, now that you mention it, Trump didn't say this. He was presented this and he responded to it. And it really makes you wonder. We all agree that whatever you think of the Charlie Kirk situation, there's an op going on here in the aftermath. There are many ops going on here. And I'm not talking about the kinetic op. We're going to get to that. There's a psychological op going on here. And it is fascinating to watch unfold. And it also feels to me, on a very broad note, I think there are multiple factions spinning narratives right now and trying to seize the energy from this Psi Act. I want to get to the Psi Act portion of it in a minute.
Yep.
But the Psi Op portion of it, this doesn't feel to me like there is narrative A and narrative B. It feels like there are several factions, MAGA, intra-MAGA, Con Inc., MSM, all and the Trump orbit, trying to seize control of this or to stop it from spinning out of control. And I think the Fox and Friends example is a good one to look at and say, are they trying to guide us toward one of the factions here, with the aftermath and how they want to weaponize the Charlie Kirk narrative?
Yeah, well said. And a few quick points, and then I'll give it to you to take us wherever you want to go. It's very clear to me. I used to get super frustrated with Trump going on Fox News all the time. And I know that General Flynn has posted about that a lot lately, telling him he needs to stop doing that. But now, like in this particular Psi Act, I fully get it, because all of these people who who some of them, like my wife, like know that I do this, and she is very tepid, like very like hesitant to engage me on like ask a question because she knows she's just opening up the like Pandora's box, and I'm just going to start like ranting to her. So, you know, her and like my friend, I mean, I was talking to my dad earlier today, and my dad, every time I bring up, like every time I question the narrative, whether it's COVID or anything else, he rolls his eyes and he's like, "Are you really doing this again?" He did that again when I was like, "Yeah, I'm not really buying it." And I just spent 5 minutes just walking through some of the basics of like how the narrative, like the story they're telling us with this kid doesn't make any sense. And he sat back and he was like, "Huh. Yeah, that doesn't actually make any sense." And I've never seen my dad do that before. I've never seen him that quickly be like, "Huh." So they're like all those people, my friend, my wife, my dad, they're all like the people who don't pay attention to this stuff daily. My dad watches Fox News every night, but like they're going to Fox News for like this information. Like they're going to like they may check out something like Badlands or Joe Rogan or whatever, but they're going to go to Fox News to get like the minute to minute play by play. And I think what Trump was doing by going on Fox and Friends is he was doing the bedside manner thing. He was like, this is a nation that is mourning. This is a nation that is grieving. And I need to take everyone by the hand and walk them through this moment. Not like explain to you what happened, but just like take your hand and tell you everything's going to be all right. We're going to figure this out. Like that's what I think Trump was doing. And then the other people like Brian Kilmeade were, to your point, were trying to use it as an opportunity to get sound bites out that they could write headlines about that were negative for Trump, negative for Putin, negative for that relationship. And then the last point I'll make real quick to pass it back to you. I mentioned the Bannon show yesterday. Bannon played a clip. I see people in the chat mentioning Michael Savage. Michael Savage did an epic 18-minute rant that's like making the rounds on the internet about how he doesn't buy any of this. And he walks through the case. Bannon played a few minutes of that, and he played some of the best parts where Michael Savage explains, I used to fly around in Air Force One during the first term. I was very close with Trump. I am now in this new White House, persona non grata. I'm not even allowed to talk to Trump. There's a wall between me and Trump now. And then he started calling out Sean Hannity and basically calling Sean Hannity, I think he called him a CIA shill. Like he said, Sean Hannity's out here shoving this thing down our throats. He just railed Sean Hannity and just called him out for what he is. So that's all of that I think is very real. Like, I think that like we're not the only ones that feel this way, that this administration, there are things about the administration that aren't quite as like pure as we thought it was going to be coming in. And there are like enemy combatants, I think, inside the administration that were let in the tent for very, very specific reasons. And the battle space that you mentioned is not only happening out in like the zeitgeist, it's happening inside the war tent, like Trump's war tent, so to speak. And that's so Sun Tzu, to like bring the enemy spy in and be like, have a seat at the table. Here's what we're doing. Go back and tell your master, right? And then bring the other spy in and say, we can offer you a better deal than your master. You got to work for us though, and we're going to give you a better life. Like that's what Sun Tzu says you do with all these different spies, and it's all case by case. But that's where I think we get into like the sovereign war, the sovereign world.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think Chris Paul uses the term drafting a lot, and I think again Trump is drafting to your point about your dad and how not just big but influential the sort of Fox traditional conservative platform is. It's a narrative platform. The liberal platform is totally destroyed at this point. It is corrupted, and I mean corrupted in that we've all known it's corrupted, but I mean corrupted in the public mind. It's toxic. You can't touch it. And to your point there, I would say I think on the macro, when we're talking of narrative battle spaces, I think that the first Trump administration and the second, which you might call the Biden administration or the Devo term, was largely spent seeking and destroying, like the target was acquired of the liberal establishment and the media establishment, and in terms of psychological warfare, to the point where I think they are running for the hills. And in the public mind, the liberal establishment is persona non grata, basically, as a movement.
Yep.
But we've been saying at Badlands since really in earnest 2023 and beyond, the real problem and the harder narrative and psychological battle to fight is going to be Trump rebranding or maybe a better word would be unbranding conservatism from the Republican Party, Fox News, and this sort of whole zeitgeist. And when Chris Paul uses the term drafting, I think when you're dealing with a cunning enemy and you're dealing with an enemy that has real narrative power and psychological power in your base, in your audience, in fact, they helped Trump get that base and get that audience because he played them, I would say. So sometimes I think people wonder, well, why would you use this drafting technique? For anybody unfamiliar with it, basically it's from Days of Thunder, from NASCAR, etc., racing, using a leader's jet stream basically to make your path easier and then to pass them.
Conserve fuel so you don't have to go in to refuel as much as the guy in front of you.
Right. Yeah. Conserve energy. It even is lower wear on your vehicle, etc. So what would Trump be doing here? He's wearing Fox as a skin suit, as a narrative shield, using it to augment and amplify his narratives. And then when he doesn't want to go all the way into a con inc op or a conservative media op, he sort of sidesteps it, as Chris has been talking about for years. And he's pretty great at it. But absolutely, and we're going to get into some Russia stuff, but it is fascinating that you bring up that they were trying to bring Putin into that interview, because there's a lot of that going on this week that arguably a much bigger story, potential story in terms of consequences than Charlie Kirk, but totally washed out in the narrative domestically. We will get to that, but sticking on the Charlie Kirk thing, where I wanted to transition us to is the Psi Act sort of viewing of this. Charlie Kirk is dead. Somebody killed him. Nobody. I mean, I'm in Canada with Never Trumpers, and what they will acknowledge, and actually without me leading them there, is that there is no way this was a lone wolf. They will 100% acknowledge that they think this looks like extremism. That might mark progress, because they're saying, like, they're now doing that. Well, we don't want any extremism. And the US is very extreme right now, where it used to just be MAGA extremism, right? So that Overton window is shifting a bit. But the Psi Act here, somebody's behind it. Many someones are behind it on an actual level. And I've been pleasantly surprised and a little shocked to see Stephen Miller and some other members of the administration, I think Devin Nunes, or former, advisors, etc., basically coming right out and saying there are NGOs that are involved with the groups that foment this kind of behavior, i.e. create these kinds of patsies. But I wonder what you think of the Psi Act and how the administration, the actual Trump administration, is navigating that aspect of things when it comes to releasing information to the public.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important to consider, and I don't have a good answer when it comes to like how they're releasing information and the transparency. I was on Badlands Daily Thursday morning with Alpha and CanCon because they wanted to do a Qatar update, and I ended up staying on for 45 minutes. We talked about Charlie for the first 45 minutes, and Alpha brought up a lot of good points where he said, y'all said you wanted transparency. So if you want transparency, like, you're going to get, it's not going to be clean. It's not going to be smooth. Like they're going to make mistakes. Like, this is how a murder investigation goes. You're going to get one guy, the next guy, the next guy. Like, they're trying to give you as much information as they have when it makes sense. I totally get that. Like that. Okay, fine. There are some questions about some of these people that were brought out where they have like a history of doing this stuff in other like Psi acts that have occurred. I'm not going to get into that here. The question of who killed Charlie Kirk, I think, is extremely important. I think that answer to that question is going to define so much. I think that is going to potentially take the entire political paradigm and throw it off its axis, and literally it'll be like a BC AD moment, like in American history, where it'll be like, here was before Charlie Kirk was killed, and like we learned the truth, and here was after Charlie Kirk was killed, and we learned the truth. I almost on Friday, I almost came out and like I had a whole thing planned on my geopolitics show where I wanted to like go through that, like what I was thinking, my intuition, my instincts. And then like as the intro was playing, I just decided not to. I was like, you know what? I'm going to pull back here because I don't need there's no reason for me to be rush out and be the first, be like in the first wave of speculation. Let me see where they take it. Let me see where they go with it, because for a number of reasons. It's like everyone's emotional, everyone's vulnerable, everyone's like hopped up on, the adrenaline, like the post trauma feelings, and I just didn't feel like pouring gasoline on that. I just didn't think it was right. Like my gut just told me not just to pull back at the last minute. So I will do that eventually, not here because that would take the whole show. But there is something that needs to be like unpackaged, and there's a lot of stuff that's out there that I think is very compelling. Charlie Kirk, for what it's worth, was a creation. I mean, you can't really deny that. I mean, for those who that doesn't take away from his personality, it doesn't take away from like I think the authenticity of a lot of things he said when it came to Jesus and traditional values and all the like. I reposted what Ash said that, and I said, look, for all the detractions I've made about Charlie Kirk and my disagreements with his politics, all of those stand. I don't take any of that back. But when it comes to like the way he talks about Christ and the way he talks about bringing people back to traditional values, I hope that's the facet of Charlie Kirk that lives forever, because that's the facet that deserves to be preserved. It doesn't mean that we have a moral obligation to adopt his political stances like that. Like for him or anybody else, whether it's Martin Luther, like MLK or JFK or whoever, you have no moral obligation to adopt the politics of somebody who was tragically assassinated. But his cultural messaging, like that stuff, I think stands, and I think that's the part that I hope lives on. Now, the question of who killed him is a very interesting one, and we're not going to solve it here tonight. But an NGO was created in 2012. The people who backed it, like a bunch of people dumped money into this thing, and it became a international, multinational NGO, 135,000 volunteers worldwide, I think now, multi-billion dollar like operations. That doesn't just happen. I mean, I think we all in this network and other places talk about this stuff to know that doesn't just organically happen in a few short years, the way that it did there. And, there's like a cost benefit, pros and cons, like who benefits the most? I mean, that's the question I've been putting out. Who benefits the most from this situation? And the idea that like the left benefits the most from this, and like a crazed leftist benefits the most from this, I don't see it.
No, this is like actually a kill shot to no pun intended, obviously, but I actually think, to your point, the far left ideology is the most damaged by this.
Yes.
This event.
Yes.
In the public mind, and this is all about share of the public mind, right? Because you can sow chaos, but the point of sowing chaos for any side in a mind war is ultimately to, get either real or the illusion of public mandate or consent on the back of it for new reality creation and paradigm formation. And you're not getting that in the far. You are not getting that in the far left for a generation or 5 after this, because again, I'm in Canada, and like the Canadians are saying the far left has gone crazy.
Yes.
And they need to be handled, while then letting me know that they hate Trump, right? But that is an untouchable and toxic ideology, and they cannot publicly brand anything with it for 20 plus years.
Yes, and real quick, just to address that, if the goal, and this is a little bit of conjecture and speculation, like I understand this is subjective, but like if the goal of the person, like let's just like adopt the narrative as fact for a minute, and this was a crazed leftist ideologue, maybe even a conspiracy of multiple ideologues working together to pull this thing off. If the goal was to sow chaos and to inspire fear and to make people afraid to show up to an event like Charlie Kirk's campus events, why would they just fire one shot and run away? Why would they not unload on everybody and maximize the casualties, maximize the terror, and be like, wow, all these random people, like random kids who just showed up after history class, they walked outside and went to the quad and listened to Charlie Kirk and they ended up dead. like that could have been me. Like I'm never going to one of those things now. It's like
more of a mass terror campaign.
But now to steal your term and steel man the argument against it. The kid the guy wanted to get away. But it's like, dude, I mean, did he really think he was going to get away? He then turned around and turns himself in. Like, none of that makes any sense. And so I don't buy the idea that this was just a crazed ideologue who wanted to take out Charlie Kirk. If he wanted to create terror and make sure people never show up to an event like that, I think you would be unloading like on everybody after you take out Kirk.
Yeah. And I would say too, you said, discovering who is behind it could be, and this could really be an inflection point. I used the term shatterpoint earlier. You mentioned a few names there, famous assassinations. The year 1968 is coming up a lot this week. Robert Kennedy Sr., Martin Luther King Jr., obviously. The Kirk assassination, I think, most immediately recalls MLK, in my opinion.
Me too.
I'm not comparing him to MLK. Like, we've been very open. Like, I didn't particularly like Charlie Kirk in terms of his political stances. We've been open about that. I think it's actually more respectful to be open and honest about that rather than pretending you were some like evangelical Charlie Kirk shill for the last few years. Didn't agree with Charlie politically, but totally agree with you that the man was preaching literally in what felt like a very earnest way for years about faith and everything. Every anecdote I've seen of him, not just coming out of Con Inc., was that was very genuine, that was who he was behind the scenes. There's anecdotes filtering through the battle space right now from people disconnected from politics, that are culture figures, talking about having met Charlie Kirk, and I literally have never heard a bad word about him. I've never, as a man and how he presents himself. That's not the case with most of these media figures. That is not the case with a lot of the guys that people in this community like or don't like. Behind the scenes opinion of them shifts dramatically. Charlie Kirk is remarkably consistent in terms of how people felt about him, having met him. So I think that stuff is real. So when I say the MLK analog, I think it's because you mentioned who is a massive question. I agree with you. I think the second question is bigger, which is why.
Yep.
And that is, and I know you would know that as well, but I think the who is big. The why is what I think could change culture. The reason I bring up MLK is because if you kill JFK, if you kill RFK, obviously deep state, obviously everybody, even normies, knows that there's ulterior dark motives to those assassinations, right? But there's something strange. There's a cognitive disconnect I've been thinking about this week when you assassinate a politician. There's some almost understanding in the psyche that when you enter the political battle space, you have entered a very literal battle space where you have governments, three-letter agencies, clandestine outfits, foreign actors, all vying for your influence and attention and power, or to remove that influence, attention, and power, right? So I'm just saying that I think that as jarring as an attempt on Donald Trump feels and felt, there's some level of, this makes sense, right? There's some level of that everybody kind of gets. MLK was not a politician, right? MLK was simply a thinker and a speaker and a believer, somebody who spoke to people and had no designs on the presidency and all of that. Now, there's theories of could Charlie Kirk have run for office in the future? Sure, but he wasn't. Yeah. He wasn't a politician. He was a culture figure. When you kill a culture figure, I would suggest that represents that you, as the apparatus behind that, have attained a level of fear of what's happening in American culture. It's a moment of blinking, I think. You try to take out politicians, you're getting desperate, but you are engaging in warfare. You start killing culture leaders like MLK, you've declared war pretty directly on the American public that you've been trying to psyop. And I think that that's why I feel that this one is different. It's not that Charlie Kirk is bigger than Donald Trump. It's that his assassination was targeting a communicator, an orator, a speaker, and again, a believer in Christ and a Christian. So, you know, I think that might be part of why it hits a little differently. So if people find out, quote unquote, why this has happened, I think that might be the biggest revelation, which is, yeah, you are dealing with a cabal, a subversive Marxist cabal that wants to destroy your way of life, not just get the orange man out of office.
Yeah, and like just to give an example, you know, and I'm not jumping the gun here and saying like this is exactly what I think happened, but like let's just look at 9/11, right? I mean, when you stop and you back up and you look at everything that came out of 9/11, the Patriot Act and George Bush and the War on Terror and all those things, and then you realize that the Republican Party is actually the one who did 9/11. I mean, look at Brad Zerbo's film, right? I mean, the Republican Party, I mean, look, I get the uniparty, but I'm saying the Republican Party, a Republican administration was in power when that happened. So they're the ones who facilitated.
They carried it out. Yeah.
They carried it out, right? I mean, that revelation should fundamentally change everybody's perspective on the Republican Party moving forward, especially when it comes to foreign wars and the way the Republican Party, like the Republican shills, talk about Putin and all these other guys out there. I would say the same thing about Charlie Kirk. Like, again, hypothetically, because I'm not going to jump the gun here, but if we were to find out that the Republican Party was somehow involved in the assassination of Charlie Kirk, doesn't that fundamentally change the way you look at the Republican Party forever? I mean, doesn't that change the way that you look at Fox News and you look at all those things? So, like, almost more so. I mean, I don't want to go that far, but like Charlie Kirk is fresh. Like, that's fresh. 9/11 feels like ancient history at this point. Charlie Kirk is fresh, and I just feel like that maybe those two things together. I mean, that could be potentially the end of the Republican Party if it is demonstrated that somehow there was Republican establishment figures involved in that conspiracy. And I do think it was a conspiracy. The question is, like, to what level does it go to? Does it go to the government? Does it go to foreign intelligence? Does it go to, you know, State Department, CIA, whatever? But General Flynn posted that he thinks it is a foreign nation trying to destabilize the United States. So that carries a lot of weight.
And, you know, one of the ways I've put this in my writing is we're fighting a nation, the nation of no nations, right? That is what the deep state is. I think it's good that Chris talks about good twin, evil twin, because we kind of get out of, even though we use this terminology a lot for the sake of context, when we're talking about nation states, we're sort of assigning macro identities to nation states that really do not exist. When we're dealing with the deep state, when we're dealing with quote unquote foreign actors, like you're saying, and like Flynn is saying, we need to tell the story to the American people that we're not talking about foreign actors in terms of acting on behalf of foreign nations. We're talking about foreign nations acting on behalf of a nationless nation known as the deep state or the cabal, right? That's ultimately what this is. It's not that France is doing something and England is doing something, even though we're going to talk about that in a little bit. It's that they're wearing those nations as skin suits because they belong to a nation without borders, and they belong to a globalist nation. So in terms of sort of last little topic on the Kirk thing here, in terms of who did it, in terms of the who, obviously we don't have all the answers yet, but I think it's pretty interesting and encouraging to see the way Stephen Miller and Trump and some of these guys, Nunez, are handling the communications. And they are clearly drawing a line between these NGOs you're talking about and things like the thing that happened to Charlie Kirk, even though I think that they're pretty much telling you directly. I saw a report tonight, came out of Axios. I haven't been able to go through the whole thing, but talking about the No Kings movement. That's one of the leads right now. And I think the No Kings movement was funded by Arabella investors, which reminds me, I had written something August 27th on my Substack that I just wanted to show here in this context. And I think this will make you just kind of perk up a little bit. So this is a little section in my brief, Mapping Began Long Ago. You got our boy Bill there. So look at this post from Trump from August 27th. George Soros and his wonderful radical left son should be charged with RICO because of their support of violent protests and much more all throughout the U.S. We're not going to allow these lunatics to rip apart America anymore, never giving it so much as a chance to breathe and be free. Soros and his group of psychopaths have caused great damage to our country. That includes his crazy West Coast friends. Be careful. We're watching you. Thank you for your attention to this matter. The breathe reference there, I would say, is a reference to George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. But so I noted this at the time. And one of the things I'd said here was on the same day that Trump took this warning shot on George Soros, Bill Gates divested from Arabella. He divested his funding from Arabella. So
interesting.
I wrote about it here. The Gates Foundation's abrupt severance from Arabella Advisors, a dark money hydra funneling billions into radical leftist psyops, blah, blah, blah. Gates' retreat is framed as a strategic pivot. It comes amid escalating probes into shadow networks with over $450 million funneled since 2008, now exposed as fuel for the deep state's narrative engines, shielding Soros affiliates and their ilk while bleeding the republic dry. And then I had said, right here, this isn't an isolated fracture. It's the latest cascade in a layered pre-planned exposure sequence synchronized with the dismantling of the globalist superstate, the warmongers NATO bloc, which we'll get to tonight, and the festering corruption at the heart of the U.S. state apparatus. Why now? Because Trump is priming the psychological battle space for a justice campaign of unprecedented scope, surfacing RICO charges against the likes of former untouchables at all levels, at once not as mere legal maneuvers, but as cognitive ciphers that bind the corporate oligarchs to the same necrotic flow. As you say, it's 2025 evisceration. This isn't just about spectral puppeteers, but the battlefield itself. The interlocking rivers of dark money, NGO infiltration, and state-level complicity that stem from the same collectivist source. So this is 3 weeks ago. We've got Bill Gates divesting from Arabella. We've got George Soros involved in Arabella, obviously. And we've got the No Kings movement funded by Arabella. And we've got Donald Trump warning Arabella on August 27th, we're watching you. And on a macro level, if I'm looking at who, on the who question, I'm not blaming a specific NGO, but I am saying this might look like it's a response to Trump's war on the NGOs. That's part of it. It's either that they knew something was coming from this apparatus in the near future, and they're telling them, like, you better not do it, or Trump and team saying, we are coming after you, provoked a destabilization activation. That's kind of where I'm going in my mind. And I remembered that today. I hadn't thought about this all week because it's been so jarring and dissociative almost. But I had the thought, I was like, wait a second. Didn't Bill Gates just divest from Arabella? Wasn't Trump just warning these guys? And now they're, Trump and his administration are basically piggybacking off of the Charlie Kirk assassination and doubling down on the NGO targeting. So I don't know. That, to me, that seems like what the target is in the public mind right now.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, first of all, I need proof of life that George Soros is alive, because I have not seen him in many years. And they wheeled out his whelp years ago, and they gave him Hillary Clinton's handler as a wife. And they're trying to build up his character so he's somebody of importance, probably for the moment that they're going to announce that George Soros is dead, so that he is not just coming out of nowhere. But yeah, that's all very, very well said. I think Soros is a very useful character at this point, a vehicle, kind of like Epstein. Like Epstein's the vehicle to explain,
right.
like honeypot and like what's that term? The term like the sex.
Yeah, honeypot.
Yeah. The blackmail stuff, compromat or whatever. He's a useful vehicle to explain that. I think Soros is a useful vehicle to explain how NGOs subvert and destroy countries from the outside in. And that kind of takes us right into like the Putin, Putin in the Europe discussion.
Yeah. I want to hit one more thing, or kind of have actually Stephen Miller take us out of this section.
Yeah.
Great call though with Soros. Totally agree. The term I use in my writing is cognitive ciphers, a template, walking template. I think Elon is one. I think Donald Trump is one. But I think we use those characters as ciphers as well. And I totally agree with you. It's not about George Soros. It's about what George Soros represents.
Yep.
And Bill Gates is trying to get out of the game, it looks like, narratively. So, hey, we starting to see some friendly fire in the NGO billionaire space. Are they starting to pull rank a little bit?
Make a note of that, everyone. The Bill Gates thing, just make a note of Bill Gates and just put that in back here, because that's going to come back when we go to Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right, one more thing on this topic, and then I want to get into Russia because it's a perfect transition from here. I'm just going to let Stephen Miller, based on what we're talking about with NGOs and the campaign, keep in mind, this is Miller responding to the Charlie Kirk situation. And it's kind of interesting, right? He's not doing the, lone wolf, radical leftism. He's picking targets here, I would suggest. I would suggest that he is targeting the American mind, and that Donald Trump is trying to refocus the American mind on these shadow networks.
There is a domestic terrorism movement in this country. When you see these organized doxing campaigns where the left calls people enemies of the republic, calls them fascists, says they're Nazis, says they're evil, says they have to be removed, and then prints their addresses, what do you think they're trying to do? They are trying to inspire someone to murder them. That is their objective. That is their intent. And when you see online, Sean, as we've seen for the last few days, tape after tape after tape of federal workers, bureaucrats, staffers in the Pentagon, educators, professors, healthcare workers, nurses, celebrating the assassination of Charlie Kirk. These are radicalized people. There is a domestic terrorism movement in this country. And let me tell you something I've not shared with anybody, but the last message that Charlie Kirk gave to me before he joined his creator in heaven was he said that we have to dismantle and take on the radical left organizations in this country that are fomenting violence. That was the last message that he sent me before that assassin stole him from all of us. And we are going to do that under President Trump's leadership. I don't care how. It could be a RICO charge, a conspiracy charge, conspiracy against the United States, insurrection, but we are going to do what it takes to dismantle the organizations and the entities that are fomenting riots, that are doxing, that are trying to inspire terrorism, and that are committing acts of wanton violence. It has to stop. And my message is to all of the domestic terrorists in this country spreading this evil hate: you want us to live in fear? We will not live in fear, but you will live in exile, because the power of law enforcement under President Trump's leadership will be used to find you, will be used to take away your money, take away your power, and if you've broken the law, to take away your freedom, Sean.
All said, Stephen Miller.
So I'm sure a lot of people saw that. There's been a million things running around, in the battle space this week, but I really keyed in on that one because let's just take him at face value. He's telling the truth. I thought it was interesting that he makes sure speaking of drafting, in my opinion, we saw Stephen Miller employ some drafting that you're talking about with Trump on Fox and Friends. In fact, actually, to your point, Trump, it seemed like, was responding to an op. Miller, I think, was drafting there. The reason I say that is he leads with all of the MSM talking points about the Charlie, and I mean right-wing MSM talking points, the Fox talking points. He leads by talking about domestic terrorism, the left. And then he transitions from Charlie Kirk and says Charlie Kirk wanted to dismantle these non-governmental shadow networks. And I think that Miller is telling you this is who killed Charlie Kirk. You know, we told you in August we're going after them, and we're telling you now we are definitely going after them. And I think it's a subtle battle that we're alluding to that seems to be going on between the Trump administration narratively and the Fox News contingent. Fox wants to talk about the left and radical leftism. Miller wants to talk about non-governmental organizations who happen to be funding the left. So I think there's a difference there. And I think the distinction is going to be important in the months ahead.
Yeah, that's well said. That's that those networks. I mean, I've been talking about this. You've been talking about this. We've all been talking about this. But when it comes to actuals, I've been You used to edit when you edited the Badlands news brief. You know that like I have the map here. I can show people the map. But Fico from Slovakia, we talked about him last week because he was at the SCO meeting in Tianjin. He was shot 5 times in the chest in May of 24 because he passed what's called the Kremlin law or the Putin law to force foreign NGOs that are operating in Slovakia to disclose their funding sources. And that was worth shooting him over because once you disclose that, you're revealing, it's probably like a CIA cutout. And then, of course, Georgia, right after that, the prime minister from Georgia is trying to pass the exact same law. This is last summer, summer of 24. He gets threatened with the same thing. Somebody picks up the phone from the EU and says, you saw what happened to Fico. You might be next if you don't back off and stop trying to pass this law. So this network is very, very real. And it's used, to the extent that they will murder politicians, they will murder prime ministers, shoot them 5 times in the chest for passing a law that Putin passed back in 2003 and then passed subsequent ones that really solidified and fortified Russia against foreign NGOs, specifically George Soros's Open Societies Foundation.
Perfect transition into our second main topic, which is Russia shenanigans. So, and NGOs. So, we'll get into the second part of this in a minute, which is the Russian drone controversy. Got washed out in the war stories this week, even though it's probably a big narrative. But I wanted to your point about these NGOs, it is interesting that once again, these sovereign alliance bros that we've been talking about for years and that the media still tells you are very, very bad, including Fox and Friends, tell you they're very, very bad, to Ghost's earlier point. They've been fighting these shadow networks that Trump is targeting for a long, long time. And I don't know if you saw, I think you saw this. I don't know if I sent this to you or you sent this to me. I think I sent this to you a couple days ago. Our boy, the firebrand, Dmitry Medvedev, had a few words on the Charlie Kirk killing. And I thought that they were pointed and signal. So Medvedev blames political violence in U.S. on support for Ukraine after Charlie Kirk killing. Now, this is misleading. This is a very misleading headline. Oops. Here's what he said. He said, following the killing, Medvedev, who now serves as the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, blamed the spate of politically motivated attacks in the U.S. in recent years, including 2 assassination attempts on Trump, on quote, a variety of left-wing liberal scum who support Banderite Kyiv. Who is next? Maybe it's time for the MAGA team to realize that by supporting Ukraine, they're supporting murderers. I thought that was a little more signal than just surface level, because he's talking about the Banderites and the Ukrainians. And for those who don't know or haven't gone down there, essentially the long and short of it is from the 40s, the Banderites were like pro-Nazi or Nazi sympathizing Ukrainians who were facilitating a lot of their activities in the borderlands. And so the Banderites are not publicly called Nazis, but I think that that's pretty generous to not call them Nazis. They're basically Nazis. They are Nazis. And Medvedev is comparing the killers of Charlie Kirk to the Banderites. And then one more piece of this, to pass it to you, is that the basically legacy of the Banderites were responsible for planning and carrying out the Maidan coup.
Yes.
So talk about the same enemy. And that's kind of the macro theme that developed in my notes that I was going over for the last couple of days is, man, from the Charlie Kirk killing to Russia and Ukraine onto what we're going to talk about with Venezuela, turns out it's all the same thread. And I just thought Medvedev's statement there was interesting, and why the fact that he chose to say, this reminds me of the Banderites. He's not talking about lone wolves. He's talking about exactly what Stephen Miller's talking about there. He's saying these are networks. Networks are involved in domestic terrorism in the United States, and the Trump administration needs to take it seriously. So I don't know what you thought about that.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so Stepan Bandera was a militia leader who was operating in Ukraine before the Nazis came along, before the Third Reich came along, and basically became like a mercenary for them. Like they recruited him and said, "All right, like we'll work with you. We know we have aligning views because you're fighting the Soviets, you're anti-Soviet, so we're gonna work with you." And then basically he was such an extremist where he would just ruthlessly like destroy villages, kill innocents, all that the Third Reich had to kind of almost distance themselves from him because he was so brazen about it, that there became a back and forth. So, and that could all just be narrative, who knows? But that's the official narrative, is that there was a split between them. I think they may have I think the Third Reich may have thrown him and Stepan Bandera in jail shortly, if I remember correctly. But the point is that he had narrative shielding from being like an official Nazi at the end of World War II. And what that allowed is for the CIA to come in after World War II and hire him to be one of their operatives. And he became one of the chief regime change operators in Eastern Europe, in like the 1950s, 1960s, like the thing that we now call Operation Gladio. He was doing that in Eastern Europe for the CIA. And then to that point, he is now considered a hero in Ukraine. There's statues of him all over Ukraine. And that flag you've seen, it's like a black triangle and a red triangle to make up like the rectangle of a flag. That's called the Banderite flag. That's all over Ukraine now. And the really, really strange part is that like Igor Kolomoisky came up with some term. I forgot exactly what it was, but it's a Ukrainian word that means Hebrew Banderite. And then there's this group called the Jewish 100 that is run by a former IDF officer who's now like a militia leader in Ukraine. And it's a Banderite flag with the Star of David in the center of it. So it's become like a rallying cry for Jewish militia operators in Ukraine. And it's very, very strange. Like that element of it presents a new facet to the quote unquote official history of what actually was going on in Central and Eastern Europe, 80, 90 years ago. Right. And it's very cloudy. I mean, we're not going to solve that tonight, but that's what when they're talking about the Banderites, they're talking about this group that really in a lot of ways transcended the Third Reich, because they were around before and they were around after. And most importantly, they were working for the CIA. And then later they were the ones who did the Maidan coup.
Yeah, and largely precursors. All these elements are incestuous and ultimately commingle, but largely the precursors to the Azov Battalion. I saw a couple people in chat asking about the Azov Battalion, and yeah, I mean, I don't know if you have any corrections there, but essentially these are outfits that have all spun out of this same collaborator sort of ideology.
Yeah, The Azov Battalion was funded by Igor Kolomoisky. Igor Kolomoisky, for what it's worth, has been in prison since October 2023. So
by Zelensky.
Yeah. Igor Kolomoisky created Zelensky. Like he owned a television studio. He created that television program that Zelensky was on, where he was like the history teacher who becomes the president of Ukraine. And the
hero of the people.
The only reason they stopped the show. Yeah. They then created a political party called Hero of the People. Same title as the show, and they stopped the show so he can become president of Ukraine for real. And then Zelensky turns around, strips Igor Kolomoisky of his citizenship in 2023, throws him in prison, and he's been sitting there ever since for like a year and a half to almost 2 years now. It's like that's really so. Again, that's a weird situation. I mean, that speaks to the Our Boy Z narrative that you speculate and dabble in. So,
yeah. That's, to me, that's the biggest soft proof or hard proof, however you want to phrase it, of our boy Z. The our boy Z thing isn't just something I say because I think that he's funny and he's humiliating NATO and humiliating the EU and being a really, really great cognitive cipher to proxy states and what Ukraine is. But the two major macros to me that have mapped onto the idea of our boy Z is the anti-corruption purge within Ukraine is targeting Banderites and Azov supporters. So Kolomoisky literally turned on his master, turned on his creator, as Ghost said, like Frankenstein's monster. And another thing there is that the most public or the most sort of notorious name in Ukraine that has been calling for Zelensky's head for 3 years is Vitaly Klitschko, who is the mayor of Kiev. And I knew him from my combat sports days, followed his career. Ukrainian heavyweight boxing champion, like really good, super boring fighter, but one of the best heavyweights of the last 20 years or so, I would say. And so another celebrity politician over there. And he has been, he named the bridge in Kiev the Azov Wave. So this guy has been saying since late 2022 he turned on Zelensky because I think they realized what was going on. I think Zelensky is part of Elon Musk said he was recycling NATO weapons, like basically putting them on the battlefield to be blown up. I think he was also talking about the Nazis. I think that he was saying Zelensky is recycling Nazis. He's putting the Nazis into Russian maneuver defense. And I actually think that Zelensky has basically been feeding Azov into the wood chipper of Russian maneuver defense. Because remember, we covered on this show and others for years, just tactical mistake after mistake after mistake. And Zelensky would just commit to the most obvious examples of Russian maneuver defense we've ever seen.
Can I play a clip from Colonel McGregor that's going to speak directly to that? And it's going to not only emphasize that point, but it's going to emphasize the drafting. So let me play the clip and then we'll kind of dissect it. But this is from Colonel McGregor on Judge Napolitano's show from 5 days ago. Okay, so let me know if for any reason the sound doesn't come through. But
President Putin is known for his patience, but do you accept the thesis that he's not patient because he's virtuous? He's patient because his goal is the methodical elimination of the Ukraine military so that Russia doesn't have to go through this again, at least not for another generation.
Oh, that's true. But remember, he's benefited enormously from our influence over military operations in Ukraine. Remember, the Americans who are, and our British allies, the senior officers from these two armies and air forces have exerted tremendous influence over what the Ukrainian army does. We have headquarters in Germany that are operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to direct Ukrainian operations. And we have done a marvelous job of accommodating Russian interests. And what I mean by that is sending the Ukrainians into the teeth of Russian strategic defenses in eastern Ukraine.
Isn't there an...
Yeah, so
there you go.
Bicamerally, you can look at that as two different ways. Like you can look at that as like, okay, white hats who are calling the shots in Eurocom are telling the Ukrainians to run, like these radicalized Banderites to run headfirst into the wood chipper and die. Or you could look at it like black hats in the U.S. military who are desperate to fight Putin are willing to sacrifice the peasants, the Soviet peasants, so to speak, in the form of these Banderites and send them headfirst into the wood chipper. Whichever you're whichever reading you prefer, it's the same outcome. And it could be drafting, or it could be like a more like bait and switch. Like we're just going to destroy you, like we're going to push you headfirst into the wood chipper. But I think it's the same outcome.
Yeah, and that's my reading of it. I agree with you that you can look at it bicamerally, and it's great. It's one of those great situations because the net effects are the same. My personal reading is the former. I would say that we're all in this audience familiar with the Linda McMahon template that's being used right now with the Department of Education, right? I think that's being used on the proxy state model. I think that it's going to be the funniest comparison. I think that Zelensky is the Linda McMahon of Ukraine. He is being used to dismantle not just literally the workings of that particular proxy and those who ran it, but I think maybe more importantly and longer lasting, he is dismantling the public mandate or buy-in to ever support this construction of proxy again in the future. And that is becoming pretty bipartisan in terms of not wanting to support this stuff. But other direction I want to go in here, the main direction on Russia, in light of a lot of what we were talking about last week, in my notes I had said, whatever you think of the Charlie Kirk situation in terms of who did it, the why is something that I think we largely all agree on. The why is to foment chaos, to sow chaos and discord, to destabilize, and if you're looking at an end state, maybe to provoke a civil war, right? John Harold has certainly been theorizing that their red button attempt, if all else fails in the culture and political wars with Donald Trump and the MAGA base, is civil war, total destabilization. Well, they also want world war, which is probably what Ghost and I focus on the most in terms of the global battle space. And lost in the noise of Charlie Kirk's assassination and the potential attempt to spark an American civil war, or at least to further the narrative toward that kind of an inflection point, they are accelerating abroad as well. And I thought it was fascinating that you brought up that on Fox and Friends, in a sit-down ostensibly focusing on Charlie Kirk, they made sure to push this narrative forward as well. So in case you missed it this week, they didn't just try to spark a civil war, they also tried to spark World War III, and it looks like they are accelerating there. This was, one of the major headlines. Russian drone incursion into Poland was a Kremlin test on NATO. So long story short here, we are being told by the Poles that Russians have been violating their airspace with big scary drones and all this kind of stuff. The latest today, I think, was that they were over Romanian airspace. So we're being told Putin is quote unquote buzzing NATO with warplanes in threatening maneuvers, and Poland responded by reportedly downing Russian drones, actually scrambled jets, scrambled F-16s. So if you want to call it kinetic escalation, you can, because there is live fire going on between NATO countries, NATO border states, and Russian operations, if not personnel. And again, to me, if you read this from a surface level, you think, wow, Putin is really being aggressive here. If you look at this the other way, for the record, the response out of the Kremlin was there is no evidence of this having occurred at all. They sound like Chris Paul in the media. Basically, prove it, show us the receipts, show us the, they were publicly asking Poland to just show the satellite imagery and to show the coordinates and to show the feeds, the live satellite feeds of this drone incursion. So they're flatly denying that it even happened. Never mind that it was justified. And, if you look at the back of the narrative, what would this narrative be trying to guide us toward? If you're Poland, if you're these NATO states, looks like the excuse for kinetic escalation with Russia.
Yeah. And actually, let me share my screen again, and let's just play the clip. This is what when I was talking about Brian Kilmeade, like gnashing his teeth. Like let's listen to this part about the drones.
And we're going to fix this system.
What are you going to do about President Putin? Because we just saw these drones in Poland.
Yeah, well,
more sanctions.
I'm not going to defend anybody, but the Poland's, they were actually knocked down and they fell into an area. But you shouldn't be close to Poland anyway.
Right.
So I solved, as you know, 7 wars. 7. I did so many, including Pakistan and India, but big ones. And we're going to fix this system.
Okay, so first of all, I want everyone to keep that in the back of their mind. The 7 wars thing that he solved, keep that in the back of your mind, because that's going to come back up. But real quick, that was Friday morning, and there's more to that clip. That was just one of the clips that I found. this is from RT. This is a different moment where he's asked about it, and he says the same thing. He says, his quote is, the headline is, for those listening, Trump downplays claims of Russian drone incursion into Poland. The U.S. president has said the whole incident could have been a mistake. And the quote is, asked by reporters on Thursday about Warsaw's claims, Trump responded, quote, could have been a mistake, but regardless, I'm not happy about anything having to do with that whole situation, but hopefully it's going to come to an end. And you can read into that multiple ways. You could read into it that the mistake was that that Russia accidentally flew too close to Poland and, crashed a drone into Polish territory. Or you could read into it that Poland made a mistake and those weren't even Russian drones and those were something totally different. And they're, effectively lying to us about what they shot down, or even if anything got shot down at all. But I see multiple layers in what he's saying there, where he says it could have been a mistake. I don't buy any of it. And I think Trump, every single time it's brought up, he basically backs Putin and he says, this is not what y'all think it is. And that was what got Brian Kilmeade so worked up when he would not bite on Putin.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I also want to show something because speaking of some of the players here and which direction we might lean in, is that we're not just sovereign alliance shills. Well, we are. We're professional sovereign alliance shills. But there's a reason for that. Ghost, this is a little bit of a rerun. I would call this a soft rerun. Do you remember this little incident?
Yes, I do. Yes.
For anybody who needs a refresher, on November 15th, 2022, a missile struck Polish territory in the village of Polish Word near the border with Ukraine, killing 2 people. The incident occurred during attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure by Russia. It was the first incident of a foreign missile hitting NATO territory during the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Initially, Ukraine accused Russia of striking Poland, while the U.S. claimed the missile was likely to have been an air defense missile fired by Ukrainian forces at an incoming Russian missile. This was later confirmed by Polish prosecutor's office, which stated the explosion was caused by an out-of-control air defense missile. Now, even that eventual narrative, I think, is bullshit. I think it is likely that was a direct false flag attack by a NATO proxy state onto a terrestrial NATO state in order to provoke the U.S. or NATO escalation kinetically with Russia. But look at how they had to backpedal on that narrative, and they were like, okay, well, it was a Ukrainian missile, but it was an accident. So just saying, it's kind of interesting that we've got Poland shooting down Russian drones while Russia says that there was no encroachment, and Donald Trump, to your point, and in that clip, clearly sidestepping the issue. Looks to me like a little bit of a 2022 November 15th rerun.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, and a great callback. Yeah, and real quick, 1 second, let me pull this up. I don't have the right thing selected yet, but just give me a second. So just we were talking about NGOs a minute ago. So if you want to share my screen, I just wanted to make clear of what I'm talking about here. So Slovakia and Georgia are both 2 countries that are not in NATO. I think they're observing members. They're in the very long process of joining NATO, but they're not official members yet. But they're trying. But the NATO people want them to become members, right? And so Slovakia here's Fico, May 15th of 2024, being shot. And
by the way, one of the guys you guys should remember from last week, if you did your homework, Fico was one of 2 NATO-adjacent, NATO-aligned countries that were present at the Shanghai Cooperation not at that one, but at the China Victory Day parade in Beijing.
Yes, correct. Yeah, the China Victory Day parade. And the other one was Serbia, which is this country right here. So it was a Serbian president, and it was Slovakian prime minister. And then so that was May 15th, 2024. And Politico is reporting he's going to survive. 5 times in the chest, he was shot. And then here is a week later. This is May 23rd, 2024. And the Georgian prime minister, who was in the process of passing the law that Fico had just passed, saying that an EU official had called him and threatened him that he would face the same fate as Fico if he continued down this path. And then, of course, he did continue on the path. And then there were color revolutions and regime change operations. You know, protests in the street, summer of love, basically, in Georgia last summer, 2024. And so here's Georgia. And if you look just geography, you know, General Quast always says, read the book, The Revenge of Geography. You have to understand geography to understand what they're doing. And if you look at the pincer move that they're trying to do geographically against Russia, Slovakia shares a border with Ukraine, just like Poland does. Georgia obviously represents a totally different theater of war against Russia. So if you could get Georgia into NATO, and now this guy is trying to move Georgia away from joining NATO, you can now introduce a totally new theater against Putin right there by Dagestan. So very important to understand like why they're targeting these specific countries and why these specific countries, I think, are aligning themselves with Putin to move away from NATO.
Well said. And speaking of geography, and look at the country right smack dab in the middle of Slovakia and Serbia. I speculated, I think at GART, just one of my darts at the board is that if you see a public turn from within NATO, I believe it's going to come from Victor Orban in Hungary. I believe he is the pebble that could start an avalanche narratively. He's sort of persona non grata within NATO because he's probably the most openly cordial and supportive. He's not openly supportive of Putin, but he is openly aligned with him business-wise.
He's pretty damn close. He's pretty. I mean, he's pretty damn close. He's the one who like went to Moscow last year and basically acted as the leader of the EU. Like they were even. I think the Russian media was even calling him the president of the EU, even though he wasn't, obviously. But he was acting like the leader of the EU.
Well, he was actually technically at that point. He was the acting. He was the acting lead counsel or whatever they call it.
That's right. I think you're right. I think it was like
it's ceremonial, but
yeah, it was like it was ceremonial. But he was certainly acting as like the sovereign leader of the EU, and he was like aligning himself with Putin. And then here he is, September 8th, so a week ago, saying Orban warns EU of collapse as the bloc might not survive without reform and an end to the Ukraine conflict. The Hungarian prime minister believes. And he says, quote, the EU is currently on the verge of falling apart and has entered a state of fragmentation. And if this continues like this, it will go down in history as the depressing end result of a once noble experiment, Orban stated. And what's interesting is that the longer version of that clip from Colonel McGregor, where Judge Napolitano is asking him about the patience of Putin, what McGregor goes on to say is, well, yeah, Putin just has to, all he has to do is just wait. Like one of the reasons that he's going very slow right now is because all of the economies of like not only the political systems, but the economies of Europe are collapsing. And I mean, France's government literally collapsed last week. And what that means is that their legislature took a vote of no confidence in the prime minister because he basically asked them to, because he was asked to find $44 billion in cuts in the budget that was impossible to find. And so he said, okay, like I'm done. Like let's hold a vote of no confidence. Go ahead and vote me out. He's the 6th prime minister under Macron to face a vote of no confidence. So Macron is still president of France, but they have their legislature right now.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a great call with Orban, but back in August, like I said, it's not because I'm some super genius that is seeing this coming. It's because I'm looking at these as characters, as cognitive ciphers, forwarding a war of stories. I think the war of stories is going in our favor. By that, I mean sovereignty, the sovereign alliance versus collectivism, collectivist superstates such as NATO, which is, one of the big darts on one of the big things we need to dismantle. And before we dismantle it, actually, I believe we need the public mandate to do that, not just from the U.S., but from within NATO. We need public mandate from the people in these countries. And honestly, and I think Orban is the signal setter here. What form will it take? I'll go ahead and just shamelessly speculate or baselessly speculate. I think Orban will leave NATO. I think that Hungary will leave NATO and will make a very big show of it, and will do it. And their story, I believe, will be that they are trying to avoid catastrophic war with Russia, and that they want peace. And I think that they will leave NATO or turn publicly on NATO as a show of peace. And I think Trump will endorse that, basically, and boost it. Baseless, who knows if that's going to happen. But I'm tracking this based on
sense.
based on the characters. And then furthermore, to that second point, I'd be interested in your response on it when you mentioned France there. I don't think we're going to get World War III. But I do believe that the warmongers in the EU and NATO are going to bring us right up to the precipice narratively. And in my opinion, how can this be used against them from a war of stories perspective? Trump is giving NATO all the rope it needs to hang itself, in my view, in the collective mind. And I can't bring this up on my screen because for some reason I cannot get into Truth Social on my on this computer. But I did take a screenshot of Donald Trump's truth post that I thought was fascinating and maps onto this idea of...
Do you want me to pull it up?
It's the one where it's Trump to all NATO nations.
Okay.
That I think it was from today on his Truth Social feed. But yeah, while you pull that up, I can start reading it. So Trump said, Trump wrote a letter to all NATO nations and the world. He says, quote, "I'm ready to do major sanctions on Russia when all NATO nations have agreed and started to do the same thing. When all NATO nations stop buying oil from Russia, and as you know, NATO's commitment to win has been far less than 100%, and the purchase of Russian oil by some has been shocking. It greatly weakens your negotiating position and bargaining power over Russia. Anyway, I'm ready to go when you are. Just say when. I believe that this, plus NATO as a group placing 50% to 100% tariffs on China to be fully withdrawn after the war with Russia and Ukraine has ended, will also be of great help in ending this deadly but ridiculous war. China has a strong control." Here we go. If you want to zoom in a little bit on that. Where are we at? China has a strong control and even grip over Russia, and these powerful tariffs will break that grip. This is not Trump's war. It would never have started if I was president. It's Biden's and Zelensky's war. The Our Boys. Shout out to the Our Boys. And I'm only here to help stop it and save thousands of Russian and Ukrainian lives. If NATO does as I say, the war will end quickly, and all those lives will be saved. If not, you are just wasting my time and the time, energy, and money of the United States. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So there's a lot in this statement, but on the macro, what I took away from it is I think this maps onto the idea that Donald Trump is allowing NATO to hang themselves in full view of the public. And I also agree with him when he's talking about China decoupling and breaking away to break the grip between Russia and China. We talked about that last week, the idea of some of these economic pincers seemingly against sovereign alliance members, or sovereign alliance members kind of going to war with each other economically. I think they're actually doing it to break the globalist system. So there's a lot in here, but I think the main takeaway is Trump is saying, we see what you're doing, NATO, narratively, with Russia and China. Why don't you go the extra mile and put your money where your mouth is, and we'll see if I join you in the effort. But I think this is a bluff. I think this is him calling NATO's bluff, rather, and trying to get them to expose themselves fully in front of the collective mind.
Yeah, that's well said. And, here, I want to pull this up because this is directly related to what you're saying. And I want to point out, by the way, you mentioned Hungary and Victor Orban before we pivot away from Hungary too far. It's worth pointing out that George Soros, born and raised in Budapest, the capital of Hungary, the official narrative, he did an interview in the 90s on 60 Minutes, And apparently what happened, the official story is that like somebody saw the interview before they aired it and they were like, dude, you cannot air this interview. This makes you look like a Bond villain. You cannot air it. So they put it on the shelf, and then somebody from 60 Minutes took it, left from the office, and then uploaded it to the internet. And that's how it's now. That's how it's on the internet now. But basically
that's the one where he basically was like, I'm not sad that I turned in the Jews or something.
Yeah, that's the one where he admits that he worked for the Hitler Youth. Because the way that Hungary, the way that Budapest was brought into the Third Reich was the Nazis didn't go into Budapest and round up the Jews. They worked at this group. I think they were called like the Red Arrow or something. It was basically their affiliate in Hungary, and it was the Red Arrow that went around, and it was the summer of 1945. So it was the very end of World War II, where they rounded up, I think it was 500,000 is the official narrative, but I mean, who knows if any of that stuff is even true. But the narrative is that he went around and pointed out all the people and said, they're Jewish, they're Jewish, they're Jewish. And then the guy asked, do you ever lose sleep over that? He goes, no, because if I didn't do it, somebody else would have done it. Like who cares? So point is that I can say this I can actually confirm what I'm about to say, because I went to Budapest in June of 2017 and saw this with my own eyes. Not only was Victor Orban back then rebuilding Budapest, they were tearing down all the communist
by hand, on his hands and knees. Saw him.
He was rebuilding it, but they were tearing down all of the communist, because Budapest, it's Buda and Pest. It's two towns on opposite sides of the river that runs through it. And for 40 days, the Russians were on one side, the Germans were on the other, and they were just shelling each other for 40 days. So it's like beautiful Baroque architecture. And then the next building is the ugliest, like communist building with tiny little windows. And so they're going around tearing down all these old communist buildings and then rebuilding the old Baroque building exactly as it was prior to World War II. And Victor Orban was one running it. On top of that, there were billboards everywhere. And my wife's cousin was his friend was a tour guide of Budapest. So he was like giving us a tour and explained all this to us. All these billboards everywhere. And I knew at this point who George Soros was. George Soros's face was everywhere. And it said on every single one, this guy is public enemy number one. Like basically fuck George Soros. That's what it said. And all of it was state funded. He's banned for life. He's not allowed to enter Hungary. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, holy shit, whoever the guy is in charge of this place, don't know who that is. He's based as hell. And then I later learned about Victor Orban. So, but I can confirm, because I saw it with my own eyes, that was happening in Hungary. So
he saw Victor Orban on his hands
hands and knees, rebuilding Hungary,
chiseling the bricks, laying the mortar himself. Yeah. No, that's great, man. Little random connection in my neck of the woods is that my father-in-law, whose house I am at, is Hungarian.
Really?
So the plot thickens.
Dude, Hungarians
name's Tibor.
They're awesome. They're awesome.
Yeah, his name is Tibor.
Really?
So I was like,
Tibor.
I have never heard that name until I met him. You know, my wife's like, yeah, my dad Tibor. I'm like, Tibor?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Because good Canadian boy. He was born and raised in Canada, but his father, straight off the boat, like fled Hungary during the war with his German wife, German baby mama. But yeah, that's wild times. Hungary is an interesting place.
Well, you go to some places in Europe, like France and Italy, and like the tourist traps places, and the locals will get really fed up with like the tourism. So they'll be like, they will have an attitude with you. But you go to places like Prague and Czech Republic and Budapest and Hungary, and they love Americans and they love American culture. And, because they were living behind the wall, they were living in the Soviet Union. So they all love America. They're super nice to you, and they're just great people. So I have nothing but nice things to say about Hungary in the very short time that I spent there.
Yeah, I get the impression. I've only, we don't see him a whole lot these days, but his father's still kicking, Opa, and Opa, and he's a based dude, tradesman his whole life, Hungarian tradesman, and I think he's a Trump guy. He doesn't talk politics, but he's a Trump guy for sure.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, I think Orban is kind of a signal setter over there in more theaters than one, and I think that his part to play will be interesting to watch. And I want to transition us into the U.S. here. I don't want to go 4 hours tonight, even though I say that every time, but it's because obviously Ghost and I can do these shows a lot, and we will do these shows a lot because this is an evergreen topic and there's so many theaters to it. So we've hit the sort of NGO aspect. We've hit kind of, go ahead if you have something else there.
Well, do your transition and then let me play this video because this perfectly transitions us. It's Lindsey Graham, so it perfectly transitions us to the next, to where you want to go, but go ahead and do the transition. Yeah. So like I said, I mean, these seem like different theaters, right? I kind of had three in my mind for tonight: Charlie Kirk, NGOs, dark money web. Then we've got Russia, Poland, 2022 missile rerun crap going on, essentially saber rattling between NATO and Russia saying, we literally just want peace and to get rid of Nazis. Interestingly, to your point, we have a Hungarian thread running through it from the NGO dark money networks. And then we've got the most prominent one being this Hungarian. We've got Victor Orban prominently re-entering the narrative and seemingly disconnected, but I don't think disconnected at all, which Ghost will help explain. I wanted to talk about the North American theater in the sovereign war, in the sovereign alliance. To set this up a little bit, on a macro, we know that, you know, a couple weeks ago went viral that Trump took out the cartel boat, right? He's obviously declared very public war on the cartels. We've got aircraft carrier off of was it off of Venezuela, or it's pretty far off there? It's not an aircraft carrier, but it's I think it's seven Navy ships, like 5,000 sailors. Yeah, so it's like a nuclear submarine. I mean, it's a whole fleet, but I don't think there's.
We've got a presence, and it was publicly announced that presence is specifically to wage kinetic war on the cartels. And you know, Ghost is going to talk about some of how he thinks this is going on, but I would suggest that this is all part of the same theater. This is all different theaters of the same war. From Charlie Kirk's assassination and the unraveling of NGO dark money networks to NATO warmongering, benefiting from NGO dark money networks, to globalist cartels operating in South America that Trump is waging kinetic war on. Where do you think they're getting their money from? And why is Donald Trump so focused on even Canada and Justin Trudeau and talking about them aiding and abetting this kind of activity, along with Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico? So I think that these are similar theaters. And last week, Ghost and I spent a lot of time talking about how we think Russia and China, Putin and Xi, are directly attacking the sort of globalist system. I think Xi is doing it through economic warfare. I think Putin is doing it through kinetic denazification efforts, and also using energy as a weapon, the withholding of energy on the NATO bloc. But I think Trump is also waging some more kinetic war than we are usually told about in the info war, and it seems to be against the cartels. I would just suggest that everything we've talked about tonight and in other episodes about the Azov Battalion, etc., you can probably apply a lot of this to what's unraveling in South America. And we may even, to Ghost Research, have an Our Boy Z on our situation. And I know Chris Paul is really deep in the Venezuela rabbit hole like you are. So what do you think's going on in terms of the North American hemisphere of the sovereign war? What is Trump doing in that theater? Does he have any support? What's the narrative? And then what do you think is the actual?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So basically the narrative is that Trump has declared these cartels terrorist organizations, right? And he's using, I went it was either last week or the week before, on my geopolitics show, I actually spent the first hour just reading through like the George Bush executive orders that Trump was citing back in January when he did this. And I went through like what classifies a terrorist organization? Like what are the standards that you have to meet in order to become a terrorist organization? And it was pretty vague. I mean, it wasn't anything terribly specific. What was really funny though is as I'm reading through it, I was just laughing. I was like, dude, this big pharma absolutely qualifies. COVID 2020, 2021, Big Pharma 100% checks every single one of these boxes. And it's not even hard. It's not even hard to apply that standard.
It's not a stretch.
It's not a stretch at all. It's all about like doing operations against the American people with the intent of changing the politics, changing the government, changing people's lives, like harming people. I mean, it's very easy, I think, to reach that standard. And so I think where a lot of us thought that this was going to go is that Trump was going to clean house, like get rid of the deep state in the U.S. and then use the U.S. as a vehicle to go out and like cleanse the world, right? But the more I thought about that, it's like that's kind of like the neocon dream, right? And that's what George Bush always talked about the world police being. And that doesn't really make sense. Even if you believe in the sovereign alliance and you think that like he's working with all these people, that doesn't really make sense. It doesn't make sense for us to be the world police that go around and cleanse and clean up all these neighborhoods for everybody else. It makes more sense that we're all going to do it together at the same time. And these networks are going to get eaten away from the bottom up slowly, like over time. And they're going to be done by the book. And it's going to be done through lawfare. And it's going to be done, with some kinetic operations when it makes sense. Before we get to Venezuela, though, pull up my tab, because this actually is very relevant. Here is Lindsey Graham on September 11th, and listen to what him and Richard Blumenthal do. By the way, the guy standing to the left of Lindsey Graham, I have pictures of this. In 2011, Richard Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham, along with Marco Rubio, went with John McCain to Libya and met with the leaders of would-be ISIS a few months later, who overthrew Gaddafi and raided his armory, sent the weapons to Turkey, which were then walked into Syria to create ISIS. So Lindsey Graham literally helped create ISIS. I mean, Lindsey Graham is a state sponsor of terrorism, and he played a material role in creating ISIS. Listen to what he says about Putin here on September 11th.
So there are, 4 countries under U.S. law that have the designation of being a state sponsor of terrorism? We're here today say you need to add one more. So this legislation, if passed, would designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law until they return the children. If you want to vote no, we will make you famous. You need to vote. Thune and Schumer need to bring this bill up soon so we can tell Europe and the rest of the world, follow our lead. What does it matter to be a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law? Your economy is radioactive. You do business with Russia at your own peril. We have laws on the books that punish state sponsor of terrorism. It's hard to get on that list. Well, let me tell you, Russia's earned the right to be on this list. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll out our bill today. We're going to ask leaders of both parties to give us a chance to debate this and vote on it. And we want to put in motion right now a process that would lead quickly to Russia being a state sponsor of terrorism, telling everybody in the world who props up Putin, you're running afoul of U.S. law, and we're watching what you're doing.
Not
and you're
that.
gonna pay a heavy price. It's one thing to go after their oil sales. We're doing that. But somebody needs to speak up for the children. We're doing that today. And we're going to have all of our colleagues lend their voice to our cause. And we're going to make Russia, under U.S. law, what they are. Terrorists. This is what terrorists do. They rape, they murder, they kidnap. So I'm looking forward to this debate. As you can tell, I'm looking forward to this vote. And if Russia doesn't want to be a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law, return the children.
Yeah, and then he goes on to pull this like marker out, and they have the 4 countries listed, and he writes Russia in this really dramatic, ridiculous presentation. But what he's doing is he's trying to co-opt, I think, Trump's like play, like because that's what Trump did to all the cartels down in Venezuela. And again, to that point, let's I think there's one other video that's worth watching about Venezuela that is going to be very, very relevant. And that is, I thought I had this one pulled up, but give me 1 second.
By the way, guys, depending on how this episode, this segment goes here, this last segment, we've basically already done this privately, but there is a council, inner circle Badlands. I think right now it just consists of me, Ghost, and Chris, who are in charge of officially certifying or decertifying sovereign bros.
Yes.
And Chris did submit a certain character as a sovereign bro. Ghost has definitely been banging that drum. I do ultimately hold final pen, auto pen authority over who is in the Sovereign Alliance and who is just a pretender. So we're going to see here. I think we might have a fusion between an R boy and a sovereign bro, but I may be able to be convinced that we're actually dealing with a sovereign bro.
Yes. And I think I'm going to go a very long way with convincing you tonight. And for those who've been like watching my shows and hearing, if you think you've heard this before, I've never brought receipts that I'm going to show tonight. I've been going deep into this, and I'm going to bring real receipts this time, instead of just kind of like broad generalization. All right. So here is, again, we're going back to Colonel McGregor. Colonel McGregor not on Judge Napolitano's show, but on Ron Paul's podcast this past week. And so listen to what McGregor says about Venezuela.
It doesn't make any sense, to be frank with you. First of all, Venezuela, contrary to popular belief, is not a major drug hub. And most of the drugs that have come out of Venezuela actually came out of Colombia and were transshipped. We do know that there are generals in the Venezuelan army who've lined their pockets, taking essentially bribes to let the drugs that come out of Colombia come out of Venezuela. But there aren't very many. The real issue, I think, for everybody is the oil and gas reserves. But the oil and gas reserves that are really plentiful, probably the greatest in the world, are actually quite deep. And we have the finest oil and gas technicians and engineers in the world. So the real question is
Okay, so before we get to the cartels, because I think the cartels, like, that's a bit more of like an obvious why they're considered terrorist organizations. Before we get to the cartels, let's go look at the sister organization, which would be the people who control oil, diamonds, gold, the commodities, because that's a cartel too, and that's being taken apart. It's been eaten away at for the past 6 years. So let's see. This article is going to look familiar to a lot of people who've been following my stuff, but let's just review this real quick. This is from 2023, how a brazen plot to rig oil auctions cost Venezuela billions. And it's a very long article, but I went and just clipped the really, really juicy parts. And it goes on to describe this guy, David Boyce, I think is how you pronounce it. He's this lawyer, and he's most famous he's been a part of a lot of really important lawfare cases, including he represented Virginia Giuffre for pro bono against Jeffrey Epstein. One of his clients is Harvey Weinstein. Theranos is another one, tobacco company. So he's had some pretty malevolent clients. Mm-hmm. But his most famous claim to fame is that he was hired by the DOJ in 2001 to go after Microsoft and Bill Gates to break up their monopoly because they were accused of having a monopoly. They were coercing the hardware companies that were making the laptops and the computers to install Windows on their operating system on their computer systems before they shipped them off to the store. And so he went after them to break that up. Again, I don't have a firm read on whether this guy is white hat, black hat, but here's an interesting little tidbit about him. July 30th, 2024, Delta hires, Delta had that big blackout where they had to cancel all the flights in one day. They accused CrowdStrike of being the one that caused the outage, and then they hired this guy to go after CrowdStrike for them. The same CrowdStrike from the 2020 election steal. That's interesting.
Speaking of cartels, again, macro theme here, cartels. Probably should have named this episode the global cartel, but I think that this is some of the mapping here when Ghost is dealing with the thing that we call the cartel and some of its connections to all of the organizations we don't yet call the cartel.
Yeah. And once we're done with the cartel, talking about the two different kinds of cartels, we'll get back at we'll come full circle and talk about NGOs in Venezuela and Dominion voting systems. But let's start here. So this article goes on to explain that the TLDR is that there were oil auctions in Venezuela that were being rigged by Venezuelan oil officials in the government, with collaborating with the executives of the three most powerful commodity trading corporations in the world. That would be Glencore, Trafigura, and Vital. Now, these three logos I actually put on my mind map before I ever found out about this article a year ago, because I was tracking this other guy, Dan Gertler. You've heard me talk about him, like the Israeli diamond mogul who was working like child mining operation, like child slavery mining operations in Africa. He was working with Glencore down there. So I was aware of these three companies. I put these three logos on my board before I even knew about this story. And then suddenly I stumbled onto the story and was like, holy shit. So what ends up happening is, I just highlighted the important parts. A laptop containing a trove of explosive material, including instant message chats discussing confidential information and account statements for offshore companies that had made large unexplained payments to family members of Venezuelan oil executives, reached Maduro. And it came to him from one of the executives. His name was Murillo. His scorned ex-wife, I guess the guy was cheating on her or something, was pissed off. And so she brings like some other guy the laptop and says, grill my husband. My husband's been screwing all of y'all, betrayed you. Here's the laptop with all the information. And then this guy takes it to Maduro, and Maduro runs with it. Maduro then goes out and through his proxies hires this guy. So this guy looks at it. And remember, I just kind of like laid out his credentials. He's a very, very high-powered attorney. He's been very experienced, worked on some of the biggest lawfare cases out there. And this is his quote. He says, in terms of the quality of the evidence, the extent of the misconduct, the amount of money, this was right at the top of anything I've seen in my career, he says. It really demonstrated a long-running, massive, and very sophisticated conspiracy. So then they create this, and all this centers around this Venezuelan state-owned oil company called PDVSA. Okay, so PDVSA is like the entity that is buying, like negotiating oil contracts on behalf of the Venezuelan government. So they go out and they create an LLC, and they file this is March of 2017 that this laptop comes into Maduro's hands. So over the course of the next year, they go out and they make their lawfare plans. They bring in the lawyers. They bring in all the players. They're coordinating with different people around the world. And in March of 2018, they decide they're going to file a lawsuit against 42 executives. They identified 42 guys who work for mostly these three companies, but there are a few other companies as well. And they're going to file that in the District of Southern Florida in Miami. And they bring the case. Now, again, you're dealing, I think they said there's like 70 lawyers involved from like on the defense side. And what ends up happening is by March of 2019, Trump comes in and he issues these crippling sanctions on Venezuela because he accuses them of being like a cartel state.
Yep. Right.
And so as a result,
keep just one note there, or on a macro. Yeah. Related, the reason I want to go to talk about this is in large part due to that, right? The seeming contradiction there. But keep in mind, if you guys followed along last week and liked that lead in to this whole macro topic of the Sovereign Alliance and what they're doing against the globalist world order, the tariffs against each other, in my view, are a massive part of how they are actually putting a squeeze on the globalist system. So I just wanted to emphasize that in terms of when Ghost is talking about Trump's tariffs on Venezuela and sanctions on Venezuela. When you think of that through the context of the Sovereign Alliance, very often you will find that Trump is sanctioning and tariffing, but particularly sanctioning allied nations in the context of kind of what we talk about.
Yes, exactly. That's a very, very good point. So Trump sanctions Venezuela, and then the defense, the people, like the lawyers defending these 42 executives, they come out and they say, Judge, The president just sanctioned Venezuela. This is now a national security issue. Because of that, we can't do discovery any further because that would threaten national security. We suggest that you drop the case. And the judge says, okay, I think I'm in agreement with you. Yes, this is now a national security issue. We're going to dismiss the case. Okay. Now, unbeknownst to the defense at the time, Maduro's lawyers had also gone to Geneva, Switzerland, where all of those companies that I just listed have home offices, and they file in Geneva as well. And as it says right here in the article, meanwhile, Boyce, Schiller, Flexner, that's the law firm, instructed a Swiss law firm to file a criminal complaint against Helsinki. That's a fourth firm that's not included in that list. In Geneva, Helsinki, Trafigura, Vitol, and Glencore all have Swiss offices. The hope was that the European authorities would find incriminating material they could use to buttress the U.S. suit. So what ends up happening then is, again, we're talking about March 2018. A few months after that, the Swiss authorities raid Helsinki's office, okay? And all of a sudden, these executives all start getting arrested. Not in America, but in European districts, mostly Britain, actually, the UK. And just to give you like a small taste, because I could sit here for the next 45 minutes to an hour and just show you headline after headline after headline.
We believe you.
Yeah. But okay.
No, it's big though.
Yeah. So here's one. They're called the Citgo Six. Yeah. U.S. oil executives convicted of corruption in Venezuela. That's November 27th, 2020. Okay. Here is, and then just to jump way ahead forward. Here is, this one's a big one. This guy, Alex Beard, he was the CEO of Glencore. So he was the top guy at Glencore. Of all those companies, Glencore is number one. They're like the BlackRock of it all. They're at the very top of the whole pyramid. The CEO resigns in 2019. Okay, so he resigns in 2019, and then in August of 2024 is so not this like a month ago, but last year he gets arrested in Britain, and he's charged with corruption in Venezuela, as well as Ecuador, Mexico, Africa, Nigeria, all of these different places that are popping up in our other digs. He's connected to. Okay. Yeah. And then here is a totally separate case. The top guy at Trafigura, who was a Formula One racer once upon a time, Mark Wainwright, back in January of this year, January 31st, 2025, he's convicted in a bribery case related to Venezuela. So again, I have dozens and dozens of these cases that I could point to, but I'll spare you like that minutia. I'll probably do my own stream about that. But what I did is I went and I got Badlands in-house counsel Ash to help me find the actual lawsuit that was filed. So here's the actual lawsuit. It names the people that they're going after. So I got all their names. This is the PDF of it. I take the PDF after like reading through it. I've done, I just did this on Friday. So I've been looking into this for like the past year, but I finally got my hands on the lawsuit. I take the PDF, I plug it into ChatGPT. I plug in all the articles. I'm like, here are all the articles that I have, link. And I say, all right, ChatGPT, go in deep research mode. And I want you to look at this whole thing and tell me, am I crazy or is this all connected? And ChatGPT comes back and it says, no, you're not actually crazy. These are actually the exact same things. And then it goes on to list all the people who were listed in Maduro's suit who have since been arrested by European authorities. And I have their names, but you're not going to recognize any of them. But there's a number of them. And here's where it got really, really interesting is that after I figured that out, I asked ChatGPT, all right, create a map of like a visual map, like a mind map. So you have like, the trading companies, the people who've been convicted, the people who've been charged, the people who have only faced civil suits. Here's a timeline that shows, here's the Swiss prosecutors raiding Helsinki, in 2018. Again, a lot of the names are not going to mean anything to the audience, but I found this guy. And this was like the smoke. I call this a smoking gun. And this is brand new information for me. Where are you at? This
I'm
guy.
on your PDF. Oh, here we go.
Here we go. Venezuelan Maduro ally Saab cooperated with DEA before arrest. Court documents show. It says that Alex Saab, close ally of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, cooperated with U.S. authorities for nearly a year, starting in 2018, by forfeiting funds and serving as a confidential source, according to a U.S. court filing unsealed on Wednesday. Saab agreed to be an active law enforcement source for the Drug Enforcement Administration and later confessed to paying bribes to Venezuelan officials. U.S. prosecutors said in the filing in 2019 they told him he would face criminal charges if he did not voluntarily surrender, according to the filing. A lawyer for Saab, David Rivkin, said in a statement that Saab only met with U.S. law enforcement officials to explain that his company had done nothing wrong, adding that Venezuela was fully aware of his engagement with those officials. The news could be an embarrassment to Maduro's government. It goes on to kind of paint it as like he was betraying Maduro, but it also says Maduro was fully aware of what he did. Okay. Fast forward to last October, and make sure I have this one, because again, it's like you can kind of, this is a little bit of, conjecture, but so here's October 18th, 2024. So the guy ends up getting extradited from, I think it was South Africa to the United States during the Biden administration. He gets prosecuted. He's in jail, or at least he's being detained or something. And it says Venezuela names former U.S. prisoner Saab as industry minister. So what ends up happening is that the Biden administration gives this guy back to Maduro. Okay. And then Maduro appoints him as the head of the industry in last October, less than a year ago, even though he had faced money laundering charges. And it says right here, Saab replaces Pedro Tiachia, who Maduro moved from the oil industry to the industry ministry in August as part of a large cabinet shakeup following a disputed presidential election. The cabinet shakeup included leadership of the oil and finance ministries and state energy company PDVSA. And then if I go back to my mind map, this is an article that I've had sitting on my board for the past year. Here it is. Venezuelans ex-oil minister charged with stealing millions from state oil companies. So it turns out, this is April of 2024. It turns out that ever since 2018, 2019, when Maduro got this laptop, he's been doing wave after wave after wave after wave of corruption purges and just rounding up officials and arresting them and throwing them in prison. And that was all in tangent. That was literally cited in the lawsuit that I showed you. It was explained. Here's the guy that we're going after now. Here's the guy that we're going after now. And that lawfare is still going on, by the way. They've been appealing it. I think the last appeal was 2023, 2024. But this guy was arrested last August of 2024, and then replaced. And here's another one, March of 2023, a month before that, Venezuela's Maduro to replace oil minister, police arrest officials in corruption sweep. He's been doing this time and time again for 6 or 7 years. And then the guy that he plugs back in October to be the head of the whole thing is the same guy who came to the Trump administration in 2017 with his hat in hand and said, I'm going to give the DEA, I'm going to tell the DEA everything I know about the cartels and how they've been, not only the drug cartels, but the other cartels, the commodities cartel. And I'm going to be a informant. And by the way, according to his lawyer, Maduro knew I was doing this.
Yep. So awesome. I mean, my audio just got messed up. Awesome dig. You've been talking about the Glencore Maduro connections for years. Obviously, this adds significant sauce to it. More players, like you said, deepens the connections there. I think the key, maybe to summarize it sort of as you did at the end there, because I know there's a lot of information there. On the macro, this is essentially, it looks like behind the scenes. I think what Ghost has really dug up on, and Chris as well, has dug in kind of different areas of Venezuela, but interesting shit. There has been an active dismantling of these networks going on in Venezuela for the last, largely during the Biden administration. Maybe started during the first Trump administration, but largely during the Biden administration, and also known as the devolution era. And these networks that seem to be being dismantled, these dark money shadow networks, which is really what you're dealing with when you're dealing with energy cartels and drug cartels, they are ostensibly the networks that Trump is very publicly posturing. So that's what I want to transition into to get your read on what Trump is doing now, right? So Ghost has kind of just painted the picture there of, as I've been saying for a long time, using Volodymyr Zelensky as kind of the key in Ukraine. He's been involved in an anti-corruption purge while supposedly being this proxy prince of, a globalist proxy state of Ukraine. All along the way, he is dismantling all of the networks that made Ukraine the Nazi stronghold that it was, including turning on the hands of his masters. As we talked about earlier, we've gone in deeper depth on that in the past. Kind of looks like there's a similar situation going on in Venezuela. And Trump is very publicly waging this campaign against the Venezuelan cartel. You used the term narrative shielding in our communications this week, applying it to Trump when it comes to Maduro and Venezuela. So in terms of the actuals that you've been digging on here, how do you think, what do you think about the narrative that Trump is painting about Venezuela and about Maduro? And what do you think do you think that that's something I would call basically a translation layer to get these actuals to start mapping onto the collective mind? Or what do you think is going on there with how he's handling all this?
Well, there's a couple different things happening here. Number one, you have Guyana, which is a British proxy state. This is like a deep state proxy state on the eastern border of Venezuela. And there's this big fight right now between like Citgo and some of the, I think it's Chevron, like the big oil companies, because they're trying to claim that depending on how you draw like the territorial waters of Guyana and Venezuela, they're claiming that this really, really nice oil belt actually belongs to Guyana, not Venezuela, not Maduro. And there have been a bunch of lawsuits about it. But the short version is that they're basically, the deep state's trying to use Guyana to steal all the oil from Venezuela. You also have on the western border of Venezuela, that's where Colombia is. That's where you have all the cartel operations. That's where you have all the drugs and the drug trafficking. So I think that what Trump is doing is he's leaning in, like he's drafting off of the neocon plan to go after Maduro. They've been trying to go after Maduro for the past, 10 years. And there's a reason for that, which we're going to get to here in a minute. But I think he's drafting off that by being like, yeah, Maduro's a really, really bad guy. We should really take him out. And they're like, yeah, we should take him out. Let's label him as a terrorist. Yeah. He's the head of the cartel. Yeah. Let's send the Navy down there. And they're like, yes. And so there's all this buildup. There's all this buildup for like what is about to happen. And then Maduro comes out and says all of a sudden that Venezuela, not the United States, because you have like build up, and then Venezuela is building up troops, and they're building up troops, and they're building up troops, and they have like 25,000 troops now on their beaches and on their border. And now Maduro says, you know what? We're actually not going to let you go after the cartels. We're going to go after the cartels.
We're going to do it first, even harder than you were going to do it, which again is kind of like a Zelensky analog of going after the Nazis.
Yeah. So if you want to like look at it as a narrative shielding, like Trump designating Maduro as his enemy kind of gives him some shielding against the cartels. You may want to kill him, like for going after them. It gives him a reason to summon tens of thousands of Venezuelan military and amass them in certain parts of the country because they think they're about to fight this invasion by like the U.S. Navy. But then this is September 9th. So like we did our last show on when? I think it was the 13th.
The 7th.
Or I'm sorry, yeah, the 7th. So this is 2 days after we did the show last week. This is Venezuelan general. His name is this is the defense minister, Vladimir Padrino Lopez. Very strange. It's like an Eastern European name. But listen to what he says here. This is like Venezuela put this out on X. And this is translated. This was in Spanish. This is in Spanish, but translated AI into English.
Happy Sunday to the entire Venezuelan family. September 7, 2025, gathered with all my brothers from the High Command of the Bolivarian National Armed Forces in the bunker, making an assessment, a review of all the operations currently deployed throughout the national territory. While here we have been reviewing all these deployments, and our Commander-in-Chief, President Nicolas Maduro, has called on us to provide special reinforcement to the existing deployment. Remember well that here in Peace Zone Number 1, which includes the states of Táchira and Zulia, we have significant personnel deployed. We initially had a deployment of 10,000 troops plus.
Those two places he just listed are the #1 drug trafficking operations by the Colombian cartel.
Well, why does he have like mannequins in his bunker?
Does he have mannequins?
I thought so. Go look at it at the beginning.
Those are his people. Those are like his.
Those are real guys.
Those are real guys. Yeah.
All my brothers from the
moving.
Assessment, a review of all the operations.
Oh, okay. They look like. I was like, what is going on here?
Yeah, it's just bad.
This looks like a movie set. This looks like a 1987. Yeah, like a Schwarzenegger's about to bust in there with Carl Weathers. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, but I asked ChatGPT to give me a map of like the Colombian cartel's operations, and Táchira and Zulia are like the two highest concentrations of where all the drug operations happen. Okay.
Significant personnel deployed. We initially had a deployment of 10,000 troops plus 15,000 more ordered by our Commander-in-Chief. That makes a total of 25,000 personnel with naval and riverine assets, with drones, well-equipped, very well-equipped. We have operations here in the Perilla Mountains to determine and verify the absence of illicit crops. We currently have ongoing operations here within the state of Apure, specifically along its significant rivers, the Meta, the Capanaparo, the Cunaviche, and the Sinaruco, among others. We are also conducting effective river patrols with our infantry and navy to block this area from possible drug trafficking. But our Commander-in-Chief, as I was saying, has ordered us to reinforce this entire sector all across the Venezuelan Guajira, throughout the Venezuelan Guajira and in Falcon State, especially on the Paraguana Peninsula. Remember that this constitutes a drug trafficking route. It is a drug trafficking route where we have always been confronting it. And also remember that it was the route used in Operation Gedeon, financed by drug trafficking under the government of Ivan Duque. We must always remember that. So we are going to reinforce these two regions of the country with resources and forces.
He's referring to the Colombian government.
It is a drug trafficking route. Ivan Duque. We must always remember that. So we are going to reinforce these two regions of the country.
So there's a longer version where he keeps going and he keeps circling like other areas and being like, then we're going to operate here, then we're going to operate there, but I'll spare you the longer version. But he's just explaining, here's where the military is going to be operating, here's what we're doing. And just so we're clear, because so people are like, well, what does this all mean? Or is he talking about operations against the U.S. Navy? Like, what is he talking about? Here's Newsweek, the morning after we did the show last week. Says Venezuela's Maduro pledges own anti-drug ops under Trump pressure. And there's a video where he says, Maduro says U.S. will not enslave Venezuela amid deployment of American warships. Venezuela has announced a sweeping military buildup along its coast to fight drug trafficking in response to United States operations in the Caribbean. President Nicolas Maduro framed the expansion as a sovereign crackdown, insisting it is independent of U.S. pressure amid Washington's deployment of 10 additional fighter jets to Puerto Rico and a strike on a Venezuelan vessel carrying drugs. And then it just goes in very deep to explain all the things. Here's the video that we just played in Spanish. And then, here are different people saying, like, what are people saying? the guy who we just watched in the video, he says at the very end of the video, he says, no one is going to come in and do the work for us. No one is going to step on this land and do what we're supposed to do. The Iranian foreign minister, Arachi, he says, threatening to use force against other independent developing nations is a clear violation of the UN Charter and a serious threat to international peace and security. I would agree with that. So I think what's actually probably about to happen, or what is happening right now, is that the Venezuelan military is the one taking the lead, going after the drug cartels, and then the U.S. Navy is sitting there in the water being like, all right, let us know how we can help. And they're going to provide support. I mean, they're not telling us that because because the media is on the side of the cartels, but that's what I think is happening.
Well, very well said. And I think, so that's the capstone or the punchline there for people that are like, what does this all mean in terms of mapping all this stuff? You know, Ghost is mapping out what he thinks the actuals are. There's a lot of sauce there of what is going on in Venezuela when it comes to these networks, the cartel networks. And, you know, again, we've got an anti-corruption purge in Venezuela under Maduro. We've, going back years, follows the same template we've seen in Ukraine, follows the same template that we've arguably seen much earlier in Russia and in China. In China, 2013 and beyond, in Russia, going way back to the early 2000s and even the late 90s. We talked about that a lot last week. So if you guys did miss that episode, we kind of touch on the anti-corruption purge of Vladimir Putin, how it mirrors the anti-corruption purge that Donald Trump is in the midst of right now. We're actually kind of late to the party with the anti-corruption purge trend. There's been some other people ahead of it. And how you ended there, I think that that's a good reading. Essentially, when we use the term narrative shielding, if you look at the actuals that Maduro is forwarding down there, Trump gets shielding, Maduro gets shielding, both of them get to save face. We're seeing that is a huge trend in 2025 is face saving. I feel like Western audiences have been educated on face saving largely through the theater you're most interested in, which is, you know, the Middle East and Iran and these cultures of face saving. And Trump has been basically doing paint by numbers explainers of what face saving is and why they need to do it. I think that's one of the funniest things he's done this year because he's doing it all the time. He is saving face to the Americans by saying, like, we're being strong against these damn cartels and this Venezuelan asshole, we're going to go down there and rip him a new one, right? Meanwhile, that Venezuelan asshole is like, okay, fine. I'll take out all the terrorists myself. But, like, you should help me, even though we're huge enemies. You should, like, lend me some support in doing it. And Trump's like, yeah, you piece of shit. I will definitely help you liberate your own country from these cartels, of which you are one of them. But also I'm going to help you eliminate these other cartels. And I see it as similar, at least public framing of Zelensky and a lot of what's gone on in Ukraine, where there's this sort of like good cop, bad cop thing where Trump is like, we're going to help you out down there with all them dastardly Russians. But then Trump will be like, there's a lot of Nazis in Ukraine and Putin has a point and Zelensky really needs to clean that shit up and we'll help him do it. But he's gotta take the lead there. And similar here, but both you and Chris, and I would say I probably am starting to lean this way as well, think that there's more than an our boy going on with Maduro. And I think a lot of what Ghost is talking about earlier here, with the court cases and the anti-corruption purge that Maduro has been involved in, the anti-corruption purge narrative template and cipher, I think, is a difficult one for people because bad leaders are going to say that they're involved in an anti-corruption purge, right? Like if we lost control in the US back to the deep state and they started going after Trump loyalists, they would brand it an anti-corruption purge. So it's something a regime would do. So if you're in the audience and you're going, how do you guys know or believe, rather, that you're looking at an anti-corruption purge that is actually purging corruption instead of just saying, yeah, this is a regime, dictator who's eliminating enemies? Well, I think a lot of what Ghost went through there, and, I'd encourage you to sort of rewatch Ghost's section on the lawfare, or not even lawfare, but the law campaign. It's been going on in Venezuela for years now. Who is it targeting? That's what you've got to look at. It's targeting, I think, looping all the way back into our first topic. It's targeting billionaires, energy cartels, pharmaceutical companies, like all of the shadow networks and NGOs that seem to all have their tendrils, as I saw in chat earlier. They've got their tendrils in everything. So just like Zelensky's anti-corruption purge seems to be targeting people who are very favorable to the Azov battalion, people who are anti-Russia hawks, and people who were either directly or tangentially involved in the Euromaidan coup of 2014. So if you're wondering, like, is Zelensky just purging people who disagree with him in the Ukrainian government? He's purging a hell of a lot of Nazis and a hell of a lot of U.S. State Department proxies. So net effects argument sort of wins. That wins the tiebreaker for me. And by hook or by crook, Maduro seems to have been waging war on many of the same apparatus. So, you know, the other thing I'd say here is that there is a key difference when we say our boy, the our boy refrain that I first applied to Joe Biden, but also to Zelensky. Our boy is different from a sovereign bro. You guys need to understand the lingo here, certification process. And our boy is a regime puppet whose strings have been cut and retied around Sovereign Alliance hands. That's how I would describe an our boy. That's what I think Zelensky is. Created by Kolomoisky, strings cut, strings retied, turned on his masters. A sovereign bro is a Putin, a Xi, a Trump, a leader of the anti-corruption engagement from the start. The start of their campaign is the anti-corruption purge. So I would say that is the difference between an our boy and a sovereign bro. So the question to you, Ghost, if you accept those definitions of an our boy and a sovereign bro, where are you leaning with Nicolas Maduro here?
I am 1,000% in the sovereign bro.
He's a bro.
He's a bro,
Right.
and I actually have. I can show you. I can't show you anything definitive, but when can we ever? I can show you something that right here very quickly that's very compelling that I think is going to convince some of you. First of all, I just wanted to point this out. That this happened last year.
Elon kayfabe is a good signal for sovereign bros.
I mean, guys, like last year, like this is Fox News or like a Fox affiliate reporting this, like it's very serious. And Maduro says in Spanish, "I'm not afraid of you. Let's go at it wherever you want." As we say in Caracas in the neighborhoods, if you want it, I want it, Elon Musk. And then Elon Musk replies back and says, he will chicken out. That's what he tweeted. Elon Musk did. And then Elon Musk says, if I win, he resigns as dictator of Venezuela. If he wins, I give him a free ride to Mars. Like this is a real thing that happened on X. And then Maduro banned X for 10 days in Venezuela.
What's a real fake thing?
10 Days of Darkness, which by the way, probably is the best. I think that probably is one of the better examples. If you want to do a Q thing of 10 Days of Darkness was when Maduro did that. But let me show you something like in all seriousness. Let's get back to the serious part. Number one, these oil executives who are being arrested, it's not just Venezuela, guys. Like and I had ChatGPT. Like I went through the AI and I was feeding it all of these PDFs. I was feeding it court cases. I was feeding it articles. I was educating it, and it was like, do you want me to add this to the timeline? Yes, add that to the timeline. Okay, calculating. Yes, these are actually connected. Here's how they're connected. Like just for example, here is a Polish oil executive.
The Poles are back in.
Yeah, a guy in Poland being arrested connected to a Switzerland oil company. This is October 2024. So like this is happening all over the world. It's happening in Africa. And again, remember back to what the quote is from that lawyer. He says, this is the biggest trove of evidence I've ever seen that shows a worldwide sophisticated conspiracy that is totally transnational. It's not just Venezuela where they're being arrested. It is Africa, it's Europe, it's America, it's all over the place. And these guys are being taken down in multiple jurisdictions, and it's all because of Maduro. And then finally, like my cherry on top that I think will convince you, this woman, Maria Corina Machado, okay? She is, if I go first of all, she's a Yale World Fellow. And if you ask Matt Ehret what that means, He'll tell you all about that. But more importantly, if you go just type her name in, here's 14 hours ago, Maria Corina Machado, the courageous face of the resistance against Nicolas Maduro, the regime. Like article after article after article after article talking about how this brave woman is the Maduro opposition. And she's been fighting this fight in Venezuela for decades. For decades, she's been fighting this fight. Here's her Wikipedia. Okay.
Yeah, who's she funded by, Ghost?
Oh, let me show you. So she's been doing this for...
This ties it all together. This is the theme of NGOs filtering throughout the battle space here.
So this woman is responsible for launching an NGO called Sumate. Okay, so Sumate was founded, I believe it was in 2001. Here it is, 2001. Sumate is the NGO that launched the referendum vote to try to oust Hugo Chavez. Here it is in 2004. But 2004 Venezuelan recall referendum of Hugo Chavez. Now, Maduro worked for Hugo Chavez. He was like under Hugo Chavez, right? So he's part of Hugo Chavez's club or whatever. Here is the woman shaking George Bush's hand in the White House. Okay. After this happens, it says after the referendum, which failed, by the way, it says Chavez branded the leaders of Sumate as conspirators, coup plotters, and lackeys of the U.S. government. After the referendum, members of Sumate were charged with treason and conspiracy under Article 132 of the Venezuelan Penal Code for receiving financial support for their activities from who? The National Endowment for Democracy.
There you go.
Yeah. So why don't you go ask Mike Benz what that is? Go ask Mike Benz about the National Endowment for Democracy, because that's the number one group that he talks about. Okay.
Yep.
So if you want to tell me that Maduro is a bad guy, like, okay, is he a saint? I don't know. Like, is anybody a saint? The woman who is literally like the MSM's super strong wingman, who's going to like take down Maduro and become like the new leader of Venezuela, is backed in 2001 by the National Endowment for Democracy.
Yeah, I think that's a mic drop. Rest your case. It's been unofficial for some time, but I can report, and we're currently featured on Rumble. So shout out to all the people who are like, "What are you guys talking about?" And to completely destroy all credibility we could have possibly had with you flybyers, we are officially certifying in real time, September 14th, 2025, maybe a little bit late on the certification. Nicolas Maduro is dubbed a sovereign bro. He is officially 100%. A sovereign bro. We have Chris on board, Ghost is on board, obviously, and I'm on board. I will get the auto pen. It is signed, sealed, and delivered. Now, that doesn't mean not all the sovereign bros get to have happy endings in the central narrative. I think we're seeing that there are some, like Assad. I don't know if he's going to get the happy ending. I think Assad's in a nice ritzy retirement community in Russia right now. We'll see if he comes back into the central narrative. Sometimes the slings and arrows in the war of stories are just too great for the sovereign bro in question to continue being the public leader of a nation. So it will be interesting to see if Maduro is reformed by Trump, if there's a face turn in the narrative in the months ahead, or if they remove him and we go in a different direction down there publicly, just like we saw the hilarious gay Al-Qaeda op in Syria. So that'll be interesting to track. But I said a few minutes ago, when you're looking into anti-corruption purges and you're wondering, does this map onto the idea of a sovereign alliance, or does this map onto the idea of this is a regime proxy state, a deep state proxy state? Look at who the anti-corruption purge is against. So we covered that. That last segment, Ghost went over, specifically bringing it back to the NGOs, and I think full circle with where we started this show with Charlie Kirk and the Trump administration telling you in so many words, NGOs didn't just foment the American battle space to make the conditions such that something like the Charlie Kirk assassination could occur. They are telling you that NGOs funded, planned, and carried out the assassination of Charlie Kirk. The why is something that I think will take time in being translated to the collective mind. But if you apply this template across the battle space and you're looking for another way to map who is Sovereign Alliance, well, as Ghost is pointing out there, it's not just what Nicolas Maduro is doing verifiably and has been doing, it's who is being propped up to oppose him. And the people, if you want the easiest marker for Sovereign Alliance, I saw somebody in chat earlier, I think their name was Skeptical. Yeah, Skeptical was saying, you just start with who the media is attacking. That isn't where you end. I've said this a million times on the narrative. I do not end my geopolitical analysis with with just playing the opposite game of what the mainstream media says. But I start it there. I start it there every damn time. Because when the mainstream media is demonizing these national leaders and you start digging, they will also be raising opposition in the public narrative to those leaders. And if you look into that opposition, you're going to find NGO money behind them in a very direct path. This one's pretty damn direct, National Endowment for Democracy. So you've got Arabella, you've got this one, you've got, this all goes back to World Economic Forum, Council on Foreign Relations, like that was the template. The CFR was the template for this kind of NGO regime change, regime making, reality creation outfits, largely funded through the State Department, and that's the deep state. And I think it's also kind of interesting and encouraging to bring this full circle back to if the Trump administration had sort of a starting opponent out of the blocks in 2025, it was the administrative state, right? It was USAID. And it was the Doge deployments against all these things. And what is it? The administrative state, NGOs, the funding of the deep state apparatus. Turns out that the deep state apparatus and these NGOs have been funding, and the State Department, which you do a lot of research on the State Department as well, the State Department has been funding all of these regime candidates, and the people that they are fighting against are the sovereign bros. You said in a private chat earlier, and I 100% agree with you, I've been saying this in the context of the Ukraine war, that the State Department has been put on an island by the Trump administration, and I completely agree with that. And I think that was going on during the Biden administration as well. But if you want to respond to that in terms of how I wrap that up and any words on the State Department.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion on the State Department is I think the State Department is completely irredeemable. I don't think that there is any salvaging it. I mean, obviously, we have to have a diplomatic mission to the world, and we need to have diplomats. But the State Department is synonymous with the CIA. There is no separating those two things. Yeah. So if your goal is to dismantle the CIA, you have to also dismantle the State Department, and then recreate whatever your diplomatic mission is, whatever it's called. It could still be called the State Department, but it just can't be the same entity that is currently in existence. And by the way, Maduro, there is no leader out there, no leader who has been more based in his rhetoric against the Zionist cause and the Zionist, the Jewish diaspora, than Maduro. He consistently comes out hard in the paint against Israel and against the diaspora. And that's one of the reasons that Marco Rubio and the Trump administration, which I think there are a lot of bad actors led into the tent. We talked about it earlier. Yeah. To let you just to be themselves. And one of the best examples is Tammy Bruce being fired and by the way, I think it's worth sharing that news story that I just wrote up. If you want to check out the Badlands news brief on the Badlands Substack, I'm gonna have a take coming out tomorrow morning on this article. But real quick, basically Tammy Bruce, the State Department spokeswoman, was fired in July because she came out and ruthlessly ridiculed the Saudis for organizing this meeting in New York where the Arab League, the Palestinian Authority, France, and Saudi Arabia signed this document. And right before they announced what the document actually said, she was like, this is a publicity stunt. This is ridiculous. This is a gift to Hamas. Y'all are all a bunch of terrorists. And then they came out and said, all right, the declaration is we demand, the Arab League demands, all the Arab nations demand that Hamas surrender to the Palestinian Authority, turn over all of its weapons, release all the hostages, and then the leadership leave Gaza forever. Okay. And a week or two later, Tammy Bruce was fired from the State Department out. She was technically sent off to work at the UN, but she still hasn't been confirmed for that. Well, the past week, there's been the UN General Assembly meeting in New York. And guess what happened? They put it to a vote among the 193 nations to back this declaration. They call it the New York Declaration. 142 nations voted yes. 10 nations voted no, and then the rest abstained, or the rest weren't present for the vote. And then our UN representative, her name is Morgan Ortagus, and if you go look at what she looks like, she looks like she was cloned out of the same test tube as Tammy Bruce. She's an ardent Zionist. She might even be like a Jewish convert. I've heard people say that. I don't know if that's true or not, but she is like one of the most insufferable Zionists out there. So at this meeting, the French, the Saudis, the Arab League all stand up and they say, all right, here are our demands, Hamas. We demand that you surrender your weapons to the Palestinian Authority, the peace-seeking government of the West Bank, release the hostages, and then leave Gaza forever. And then she stood up. She literally pulls out Tammy Bruce's statement, rereads it, just being as disrespectful as she possibly could to Saudi Arabia. And then she says, make no mistake, this resolution is a gift to Hamas. This is yet another misguided and ill-timed publicity stunt. That's exactly what Tammy Bruce said. And she says, the only beneficiary is Hamas. When terrorists are the ones cheering, you are not advancing peace. You are advancing terror. That's what Israel's UN ambassador, Danny Danon, said. And then Morgan Ortagus stood up and said, the only acceptable outcome, the only thing that we can do from here is to demand that Hamas surrender all their weapons, release all the hostages, and leave Gaza forever, which is exactly what the declaration says. So I wonder if the woman is touched in the head or if she, what her problem is, but it's a total embarrassment. She's ridiculed. She's made a mockery of herself, a mockery of the State Department. Everyone in the world is looking at each other is this woman retarded? We just said that. Yeah, bitch, we just said that. We just signed something with all these countries, just said Hamas needs to surrender, hand over the weapons, release the hostages. What are you talking about? What are you smoking right now? And so it's amazing that this is where we are, but these people are so possessed by Zionism that they can't even look straight. Like anything that the Arabs try to do, they're going to shoot down and be like, that's stupid. That's not what we're doing. Even though it's exactly what she turned around and said 2 minutes later was their list of demands. So,
yeah. And, Trump is, I wouldn't say he went hard in the paint, but he certainly had his comments this past week in the midst of the chaos about Israel and Qatar.
Yeah.
So that's a funny little theater too. And again, all these things, I don't think there's so much on temporal timelines. These translations we talk about, translating kind of these stories for public consumption, the translating the actuals. And that's what I think. I hope we accomplished a bit tonight on the, especially the Venezuela section. It's complex. There's a lot going on there. The reason I wanted Ghost to go through kind of his mind map on the actuals with Venezuela is to show you that we're not only analyzing what the narrative is. We're trying to look at what can we verify or seemingly verify of what's actually been going on in these places from the perspective of what you would frame as a sovereign alliance versus a globalist regime. Is regime power being amplified and taking hold in these places, or does it seem to be going in the other direction? Does regime power, does globalist power, and especially NGO money seem to be getting siphoned out of these places? And with Venezuela, it looks like it's the latter scenario. And when you try to trace back, why is the globalist cartel losing so much purchase in Venezuela? I mean, pun intended, I guess. Well, it looks like Nicolas Maduro has a hell of a lot to do with that. So earlier in the show, we've mentioned these anecdotes a million times, but you've got, Vladimir Putin kicking George Soros out of Russia and all of his associations. You've got the president of Georgia doing the same thing. You've got Robert Fico. You've got Vucic doing the same thing in Eastern Europe there. You've got Hungary doing the same thing. These are all sovereign bros. And as I said on last week's show, which if you're new here, if you're watching on the homepage and you want an introduction, this show is a part 2. I'd encourage you to go to the channel or to just search The Narrative, episode 37, The Sovereign War, Ghost and I did last week. That's really the table setter of what we see as, I call them the Trinity. Trump, Putin, Xi are waging war on a globalist cartel. And the irony of it, or the difficulty of recognizing that, besides fighting through generations of programming on Russia and China, etc., is that many of the moves that are helping to dismantle the globalist cartel's power structures are being wielded against each other, because the nation states survive a trade war between the peoples survive a trade war between the U.S. and China. You know who doesn't survive a trade war between the U.S. and China without rapidly changing what they're doing? Apple.
Yeah.
Because now Apple has had to actually become an American company again in very short order. And that was a result of a pincer, in my opinion, between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. The result of that pincer and the economic pressure that had to be applied from both sides. Because keep in mind, no matter how many tariffs Trump puts on, China is an economic powerhouse and could balance the scales on the other end to still make it worth Apple's while to do business there. But they responded in that face-saving manner that the sovereign alliance is engaging with each other in. They responded by squeezing Apple from their side too. So that's just one little example, and I think, Ghost described tonight, Venezuela is running a similar. Trump and Maduro, who is getting squeezed in the tension between Trump and Maduro? Well, NGOs and cartels are getting squeezed
and oil
in that
executive
tension.
and oil powerful, very, very the most powerful oil, diamond, and gold executives in the world. And by the way, the same authorities, the European jurisdictions that have put dozens and dozens of these guys, we're talking about the most powerful oil executives in the world, have put them in prison over the past 6 years. They are currently investigating Apple because Apple has been involved in this very vast, elaborate child trafficking or child slavery scheme where they are mining these rare earth minerals in the DRC, and then they walk them into Rwanda. They launder the minerals in Rwanda, and then they put them on the market. And then Sony and all like the military defense contractors and Apple buy these minerals from Rwanda, even though they're like blood diamonds. They're like blood minerals that were mined by children. But they go and they clean them, on paper, and they give them the right certifications, and then they sell them to Apple. Apple is now being investigated by the same authorities that put those guys in prison. Apple's now getting squeezed by them, and that is in like total. That also appears to be that's another show, but that appears to be another pincer that Trump. Because as soon as that got announced back in December, Apple came on their hands and knees to Trump and said, "We'll give you $500 million. Please help us out." Yeah. So
and again, as I said earlier in the show, let me see here. I'll bring it up again. Interesting seeding. I'm not saying it was seeding of the Charlie Kirk op, but I think it was the beginnings of the disclosure that continues to go on through the aftermath of the op. Keep in mind, as I said earlier in the show, Donald Trump ended the month of August by calling out Arabella advisors, George Soros, mentioning RICO charges, and Bill Gates pulled his money out of the organization. Arabella is currently connected to the No Kings movement. The No Kings movement is currently being connected to having foreknowledge of the Charlie Kirk assassination.
Yeah.
So this stuff's all developing, but again, what networks are being squeezed and how are they being squeezed? And when you look for that, you start to see that it really is a global cartel. And I think these are some of the language games that Trump plays. When he talks about the cartel, yes, did he blow up a boat with 12 cartel, drug runners in it? Sure, whatever. That's not what Trump's talking about with the cartel, in my view. He's not talking about coyotes trafficking fentanyl across a border. He's talking about the globalist cartel. Yeah. And we seem to be entering the beginnings of a phase. And unfortunately, the Charlie Kirk situation is accelerating that phase. So that's a good thing that's coming out of it, even though it's a horrible situation.
Yep.
But it is accelerating Trump's ability to publicly target the Cantillon effect closer to the cartel printer. Instead of just focusing on these drug mules in the backwaters of South America, Trump is able to start saying, you know where the money starts? It starts maybe in the State Department, but also it starts in the hands of foreign billionaires. And as I've said before, on companies like Apple, Samsung, et al., if you play a mental little game and you switch thinking of Apple as a company to thinking of them as a nation state because they have a market cap that dwarfs most nation states or many nation states GDP, then deployments that squeeze them start to look a little different. It starts to look a little bit more like warfare. But yeah, we can do a whole show on the corporatist oligarchy that Trump and the Sovereign Alliance are squeezing. And tonight, Ghost showed you that who else is squeezing the corporate oligarchy? Nicolas Maduro.
Yeah, I would go as far as to say Nicolas Maduro is the reason that they have the roadmap to go after all those executives. He's the one who provided the quote-unquote laptop from hell in 2017 that led to all that.
Yeah.
And if you understand the history of the cartel, like way before Pablo Escobar, United Fruit Company, their lawyers were Sullivan & Cromwell, the law firm that the Dulles brothers worked for that would go on to become, not only were they at the Paris conference after World War I and they drew the lines that became the Middle East, but they went on to become the CIA in 1947. So, this is all connected, but it's much bigger than just Pablo Escobar and the cartel. This is but before it was Pablo Escobar and the cartel, it was United Fruit Company, which is now known as Chiquita Banana, by the way. And the reason they had to rebrand to Chiquita Banana is because they were caught running guns for the cartel in like the 90s. And then after they changed it to Chiquita Banana in 2007, they were caught again running guns for the cartel. So it's like
they just can't stop, Ghost.
They're just addicts, man. They're addicts. So before we do the rants, I have a 1-minute video that is a nice teaser to the next time you and I get together that brings this all back to Russia. And it confirms something that I speculated to CanCon on Badlands Daily a year ago. So I think it's worth playing whenever you're ready. But before we do the rants.
Yeah, before we transition to the rants there, thanks for everybody for watching the show. We're gonna get into that as we work our way out of here. I said no 4-hour show. We almost kind of made good on that. It'll be like 3.5. But hey, these are good shows. I hope people enjoyed it. Please hit the thumbs up button. It actually helps the show tremendously. Gets more eyeballs around. Helps us internally. All that kind of stuff. And I do also want to thank our final sponsor, which is ourselves at Badlands Media with Soft Disclosure.
Deodorant should do more than cover you up. It should protect you all day long.
Dude, the deodorant stick is legit. I like the mint one. And, you go work out and you kind of get you get funky if you work out. Dude, at the end of my workout, I'm sweating, shirt got all those sweat. I'm like, dude, I still smell good. I absolutely love it. If you guys haven't tried it, try it.
That's the difference with Soft Disclosure. No aluminum, no chemicals, just clean, natural ingredients that fight odor and keep you fresh through every workout, every meeting, every moment.
I've always struggled with the you can't use aluminum deodorant because you're going to die if you use it kind of thing, because all of the non-aluminum deodorant products suck pretty much. Yeah. This is different. This is all day. You're all day good, and you're not putting any of that disgusting chemicals right near your lymph nodes.
Soft Disclosure deodorant, real protection, real freshness, built on truth. Available in mint and lemon grapefruit. Visit softdisclosure.com and use promo code Badlands for 15% off.
Soft Disclosure. Soft Disclosure.
I haven't seen that yet.
I haven't seen that either.
It's great.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So Soft Disclosure has been a hit. You guys have been killing it. That supports Badlands Media directly. We worked with Willow Wind Farms. She was on Annie there, was on John's show like a week and a half ago talking about it. It literally took like 2 years for all this to come together. And for her talking about how long it took to even like form these things out of the ether and create is pretty interesting stuff. You know, it looks. I'm just like, I don't know what goes into a tallow bar. Turns out a whole hell of a lot of work goes into producing one that's not full of a bunch of bullshit. So when you get these products, obviously people have been raving about them. You're going to be the judge of that. But yeah, that's a new promo code too, or that's a new discount I just saw. So 15% off. Help us out, and it helps you out too, hopefully. So we will transition toward the rants. We're going to hit your video on the way there. But again, thank you guys for watching. Please hit the thumb. And if you're new here and you're wondering what we're talking about with the Sovereign Alliance, episode 37 last week is probably a good intro. And we've tried to keep these things current of exploring the current battle space. But, you know, there's a lot of macro takes that we're throwing around as well. And hey, we're not going to be right about all of it, but we're going to be wrong about none of it. I think that's what I'll
I think I was on
that's all.
I was on one of your first ones too. I think it was like episode 5 or something. I think it's called the Sovereign Alliance. Maybe it's episode 10. I have no idea, but it would be interesting if people went back and listened to it to how poorly our takes aged from back then, because that was probably like December or January.
Right.
But yeah, so
yeah. Look back at some of our earlier episodes on the Sovereign Alliance. If you search the word sovereign, I think we did an episode called the Sovereign Alliance.
Yeah,
and then we've done the Sovereign War. We did the Sovereign World tonight. The takes are not aging poorly, I will say. so anyway, we appreciate it. All right, let's hit your video here. Then we'll get into the people, and then we'll get out of here.
So very quick, like 1 minute clip. The context of this is what happened in Qatar last week with Israel bombing Qatar, and the question being who is going to hold Israel accountable in terms of like violating international law, which is what Qatar is calling for. Let's listen to what Colonel McGregor has to say.
Negotiating team, they're conflicting reports, but this could certainly have an impact on our relations with Qatar in a very negative fashion. We may not be able to go there in the future. We may have to find somewhere else to go. But I don't think anybody is completely surprised. The Israelis are simply more brazen than ever before because there is no one out there to enforce international law in any way, shape, or form. Although Putin has made a number of statements recently indicated that depending upon what the Israelis do in the future vis-a-vis Iran and other countries in the region, that the Russians may be willing to intervene militarily. We don't know.
Yeah, so righteous Russia. And that was something I speculated to CanCon a year ago, and I've speculated on John's show a few times, is that there's an ethnic, historic connection between Israel and Russia, because Israel came out of Russia. So we'll see.
And the Ukrainians are maybe the bridge right there.
Yes.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. But Sovereign Alliance, they're still kicking. They're still kicking ass, taking names. All right, let me grab a couple of boosts that came through from last time around. Again, if you're watching on replay, you can go to badlandsmedia.tv/boost, select the narrative, and shoot one over. We've got Fat Man sent $100. You should consider making a documentary about Putin and Xi Jinping. Every single documentary about them on YouTube is some sort of weird, subversive propaganda. Hit up your Codex 911, bro, or something. Regardless, God bless. Thank you very much. That's very generous of you. And who knows? Yeah, we'll make some other docs around these parts. We'll get Brad to spend 4 years on each one.
Yeah, funny how all the documentaries on YouTube are all anti-Putin and anti-Xi. Like, funny
Weird,
how that works, right? Yeah.
Again, I lost my train of thought earlier. I've said it before, but there are 3 men who George Soros himself, the Sultan Slug, has designated threats to global democracy. And those 3 men are Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and Xi Jinping. So pretty interesting to see how Georgie boy is doing there. And you got to fight through that cognitive dissonance if you're able to like maintain this strange paradox where the Sovereign Alliance or Putin and G are evil, horrible, bad men, while all of the worst elements in the world are trying to destabilize them. You might want to re-examine those underlying premises.
Yeah.
Badlands Media fans, $75. This makes up for my missing the deadline to contribute to your Kickstarter campaign. Keep up the great work, BB. Thank you very much. The campaign funded successfully. I was just notified during the show that the funds are actually on the way to my account this week. Takes them a couple of weeks. So once those funds, of course, the bagmen take their cut. But once they take their cut, that'll hit my account. For anybody who supported the campaign, I really appreciate it. The reason it takes so long is because I've got to get the money. Then I've got to send out surveys to get everybody's information. That'll be later this week, later this month. October is production. November is shipping. So appreciate all the support, but I will not just launder your money. I will launder it into books, and then I'll send those books to you. So it's the old-fashioned way. Food 32 Heals. But speaking of Brad actually has a copy of my audio version of the book, and he has been enjoying it. So that'll come out in a few months, I think. We'll put that together. I know there's a lot of international vagabonds who watch the show who were not able to buy a physical book because it was US only. You will be able to get an audiobook, and it's pretty sweet.
Nice.
Food Heals. $17. If interesting or relevant, would like your take on the timing of the September 8th New York Times story on Epstein's accounts at JP Morgan, one day after the US Open, where JP Morgan was main sponsor. GP, Badlands, Breitbart had all published related stories in June and did not in September. Huh. The New York Times story on Epstein's accounts at JP Morgan.
On
I mean, I don't know how those are connected, but I mean, I think it's worth tracking.
Yeah, I mean, there's some players who were at JP Morgan who I think are connected to Deutsche Bank. I want to say Deutsche Bank was involved in that too. But yeah, it's like if you go track the names and the banks that are involved in this stuff, there's a web that you make, and the web all starts to like overlap, and it's wild. It's wild how the stuff that Trump's doing with certain executive orders overlaps with like these prosecutions, overlaps with like Maduro's lawfare, overlaps with the Epstein stuff. I mean, it's one giant web, and it's basically a bunch of small webs that are part of one giant web.
Totally. Exactly. That's how it's compartmentalization, but it's a collective form of it. That's what the irony is. The deep state's a bit of a paradox. It's collectivism, but it's kind of decentralized, except once you start pulling on those threads, they all end up connecting to each other, which is what will take them down. Tom Terrific 54 sent $25 over. It's been an exhausting week and we're not fully into the storm yet. I hope that we all make it through the peak of the storm. We will, Tom. We're good. We're already doing better. All of us, I think. Yep. And we're starting to map, we got to map it in the chaos, and you got to learn to live in the chaos like Trump does. And
find zen in the chaos, really.
Find zen in the chaos and take faith that if you are lying on the back of the Charlie Kirk narrative, for example, and your intentions are impure, if you're in the media space, that's a lot harder to keep up for a long period of time, right? Just as simple as that. So they're going to end up outing themselves, and we're all watching very closely. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all shakes out. Vrooman, $10. Thank you for your voice. Thank you for the show. My mind becomes stronger on Sunday nights. Thank you.
Appreciate you, Vrooman.
It was a good little therapy break for me from now I have to go down into the depths of the basement where my wife is with my infant child and my infant acting wolf.
Godspeed.
And yeah, see how that's going. Counterinsurgent, $10. Do you follow the Daily Gondor account on X? I highly recommend. I've seen tweets from it. Good stuff there.
I do not, but I'll have a look at it.
We will be doing a Sovereign Fellowship episode at some point. Maybe next week. Who knows? Who knows at this point? Ghost has become the de facto co-host.
There you go.
Which is going to kill us both, I think. Nell P, $20. Is there conflict ideology right now in your sphere? Dogs sense this. I think he is a neurotic German Shepherd. He's a working line. He's got an infant boy to protect. And when I came upstairs to do the show, his mother was upstairs with the baby in a separate room, and he was downstairs with the grandparents, and he went ballistic. And normally he's fine with that. He loves his grandparents. So I think that's what's going on. It's the new cub, the baby on the drive here through New York. We would stop at, we stopped at a rest area. My dog eats raw meat and obviously loves it. I tried to feed him and he would not eat at all until the baby was back. So
he has anxiety over it. He's
total
anxious over the baby.
Literally wouldn't eat until the baby was next to him again. So I think we've learned maybe a little too much, little too stressful for him traveling like this. So anyway, been a tough lesson to learn. Nell P, $20. Is there? I just read that. Thank you for the support. Mean Gerb, $20. How's it possible after Butler that any roof in the vicinity of a speaker does not minimum have a security guard sitting on it? You don't need any skills to monitor a roof.
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's very simple and very simply could be implemented.
Yes, these are the questions that should be asked that nobody's asking.
Yep. Thomas Times, it's worth noting CK Shooter has the perfect dual backstory for social strife. 1, talk to any Dem and they say he's the son of a patriot family. 2, talk to any Republican and they say he's dating a trans. Yep, I got hit with the he was a Republican from my Canadian laws. So that's how they're trying to split this one.
Yeah, my wife was super triggered. Like I said earlier, for those just joining, that my wife didn't even know who Charlie Kirk was. When I asked her if she'd heard about it, she was like, "Who's Charlie Kirk?" And then she saw his face and recognized him. But she was very triggered by the fact that her entire social media feed was people describing the shooter as Republican, as MAGA. So
yeah, op's gonna op. Sharon Campbell, Bannon announced at the end of the Kirk vigil tonight that they will be working really hard to track down the real shooter tomorrow, Monday. Not today.
Not today.
Not today, but tomorrow. Yeah, in terms of the, Mrs. Kirk thing, I mean, obviously that's a horrible situation. Weird narratives coming out of that. I mean, just odd optics all the way around.
Yes. Yep.
Including from Bannon. They're going both ways. So I don't know. I don't know which way it's mapping, but we'll keep an eye on it. BK Lepetsky, $17. BB, we spoke about complexity and story construction. This really feels like the phase transition. We had been on a winning streak, and the random unforeseen exogenous event is this assassination. Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm not saying that was planned out that way, but yeah, we've been pushing toward inflection points, probably in multiple theaters at once, and this probably isn't the last one. But I do think that they're playing a finite game, the enemy, and examples like this are examples of that, ironically. When they do shit like this, that is not the move of a winning side. That's the move of a disruptor. And when you're trying to disrupt everything via chaos, you're not in as much control as you'd like to think.
Yeah, and one thing we didn't get to, but we should get to the next time I come on, is I'm seeing a lot of geopolitical unity, and not the gay kind of unity, but the unity that's hey, we should all work together to take out this nemesis that is causing problems for all of us. And I'm talking, of course, about Israel, but Qatar is the one who's calling on everyone to come together to deal with the problem that is Israel. And to McGregor's point, it might be Russia as the one who militarily intervenes. So.
Yep. Toxicata, this week's end brought me back to a defected time when references were made about the Dark Knight. I think we got our Harvey Dent symbol-wise of hope and a bright future. Your thoughts, BB? Harvey Dent. Didn't I bring Harvey Dent up in chat 2 days ago? Who was I talking about?
Oh, I think you did, actually. I think you said, who did you talk about? Who were you talking about with Harvey Dent?
I don't know if it was Charlie Kirk, but
I don't know if it was Charlie Kirk either, but it was definitely, but I remember you mentioned
it was in this orbit. Yeah, it's interesting that you bring this rant up, because I literally referenced Harvey Dent in Badlands chat 2 days ago around this whole saga. Live long enough to see you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
It might have been the fact that like we were all talking about, all the speculation that Charlie was questioning, like the last interview he did was with Ben Shapiro, where he was like, shouldn't we be asking real questions about Israel and like what they're doing right now?
Right.
And it's like, by his death now, like his pro-Israel position is now calcified forever.
Right.
And his martyrdom then becomes a vehicle to forever push that take.
Yes.
Right.
That's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that was a good take by me. I wish I had remembered it. But yeah. I think maybe we did see our Harvey Dent scenario. Secrets, $20 for the boys. Thanks. We'll split some with the Sovereign Bros.
Appreciate that.
Grease Monkey, Sovereign Bro needs to bring a bunch of thumbs up. Yeah, guys, hit the thumbs up.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Garden Guys, Glencore PLC, and Chandra Asian Pacific bought Bucom Refinery from Shell a year ago.
I will save that in my little document that I have of just all the different Glencore rabbit holes. Glencore is all over my mind map.
Every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
I know, right? Yeah. It's like, great. Now I'm going to Asia. I've already been in Africa, Europe, South America.
Yep. Funky Joe Medina, great show. Note, my friend can't watch any BB shows and pay attention because she's hypnotized by BB's beautiful eyes. Oh, isn't that nice?
Yeah. That's by design. It's actually we're conducting some mysticism here as we do this, right?
Ghost has the Michael J. Fox weave. The hair weave is it fits the narrative weave. Makes sense to me too. Where does Bolsonaro fit in? Temporal collateral damage? That's a whole topic, but I am curious as to where that's all going. I mean, I agree with you. We talked about it a little bit earlier today, and it does look like an analog to the Biden era, but a longer version of it. Strange.
I believe he was just convicted or sentenced to 24 years in prison.
27, I thought. Yeah.
27. Yeah, but I think, isn't he living in Florida? Like, I don't think he's in Brazil. Yeah, I mean, Lula, to me, he was in prison, and then Bolsonaro let him out of prison, and then basically he became president. Obviously, he was installed by like the CIA or like the CIA plus, whatever it is, Five Eyes. But I think Lula, there is like I don't know if I'd say our boy Blue, but I wonder if they let him out to let things get worse because the Brazilians didn't seem to really get it. I mean, they had a January 6th. They even had the guy with the guy with the
was
horn.
on the same day.
It was like they did every single little thing that happened on January 6th happened in Brazil, and the Brazilians still didn't seem to get it the way that I think the Americans got it. So I don't know. I mean,
that's why we're deporting them all.
Yeah, it's exactly why we're deporting them all, and I think it's proof that
you need to clean your shit up.
You will get the hose if you don't figure it out. If you don't take responsibility for your sovereignty and responsibility for your country, you will get the hose again. So
just. It was like, you get back in there.
Yeah.
That's what's going on. Babbage, you got a $5 YouTube super chat from Peter Friedrich. Text is a thumbs up. Thanks, Peter. I'm terrible about checking the YouTube stuff.
Yeah.
And right now I'm on like a 7-year-old laptop that is not up to the challenge of what I'm doing. It is burning my fingers as we speak. So
Peter is always throwing a super chat on YouTube. So shout out to Peter.
Appreciate that. IIS2C, $20. Wow, great show. Need to re-listen to this. Appreciate your brains. Thank you. Yeah, re-listen to this. And this is, again, supposed to be a two-parter. Go back to episode 37, The Sovereign War. If you want an earlier version, look up The Sovereign Alliance. And that's kind of an intro. iRosie says, great work on the deep digging, attention capturing show. In light of what your view is here regarding Maduro, what's the explanation for Bondi's $50 million bounty on him?
Yeah. I mean,
just pumping his bags, pumping the bros' bags.
Yeah, I mean, my take is that it's narrative shielding. I mean, if the cartel is as powerful as we think it is, and I think it is probably pretty powerful, of course, created by the thing that also created the CIA, the Federal Reserve, Israel, like all of it. Narrative shielding, $50 million bounty is pretty convincing that Maduro and Trump are not on the same side. And if that doesn't convince you, then surely the spat with Elon Musk last summer on X has to convince you that they're not on the same team.
Yeah, Elon's the comedy deployment. That's when you know you've jumped the shark. His public breakups with people are dramatic. Rosie, also regarding Bill Gates, he's supposedly said to be standing trial over allegations related to COVID-19 vaccine injuries. I haven't seen that, but I think it's very notable that Bill Gates entered the narrative kind of on the periphery at the end of August in relation to Arabella Advisors. And I don't know, if you were looking for entry points into starting to disclose on what some of these billionaires have been knowingly funding, and that's the key word, then maybe we're setting up for that. And then Broke Cracker or Craker, Satan fears the storm that's about to come. I would agree with that. Yeah, that's why Ghost said, Zen, be Zen in the chaos. You got to embrace it. It's jarring to all of us when unexpected things like this happen, but as Bane said, you embrace the darkness. I was born in it. And I think that we got to embrace the Bane ideology in the info war when it comes to chaos. We thrive in it. That's what the info war is. It's engineered and weaponized chaos by everybody. And we're not talking about the actuals. The actuals suck when something like that happens last week. Mm-hmm. And it's probably not the last thing that's going to jar us all. But that should deepen your resolve that this is real shit that we need to take care of. But more about the narrative. That's why I do this show, and that's why we talk about a lot of this stuff from a narrative perspective, because that's ultimately what the battle space is that we're navigating. And if you kind of let these trauma events, even if they're real events, sway the way you are engaging with the world in a negative direction, then that's you're succumbing to what they want. And I don't think most in this community are going to do that. So just gonna be stronger.
Yeah, and I would just say, it's like process the emotions of it. It's like that, like don't succumb to the emotions and don't ignore it. Like don't bottle it up and let it, because then that's what, like when you ignore it, that's when it all builds up, and then one day you wake up and you just snap and you're like, I can't take it anymore, and that's when you black pill. Go listen to DPH last night, Devolution Power Hour. Go to the Badlands Rumble channel for those who are new here and listen to what Chris Paul says. I mean, John and Chris had a great conversation last night, but Chris walking through like the logic of that, of just the event and what's happened since, I think was very therapeutic and would be good for people to listen to. So I would highly recommend that.
You're in a mind war, and I think one side is trying to weaponize your mind and the other is trying to free it, but both are trying to influence it. And you can't call yourself a sovereign unless you are exercising total control of your mind. And that's got to be the key. That's got to be the key. And, if you're a sovereign mind, you don't have to worry about whether or not you're supporting Patriot plans if you think the Patriot plan is sovereignty, right? So stop worrying about seizing your sovereignty and just seize it already. It's already there. It doesn't have to be given to you. It already exists. You just have to express it. And that means questioning even the good guy narratives, maybe especially the good guy narratives these days. All right, we got another one at the wire from a known kook, Cam Cooksey himself. $7. Oh, you think the darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it. I didn't see the light until I was already a man, and by then it was nothing to me but blinding. Some good writing. Good quote out of Bane. You can take a dark character, turn him into a symbol of hope. That's what we do around here. Black Hat Destroyer, yeah, keep filibustering until we get to the 4th hour. Pretty much did. My whole family is probably comatose downstairs. It's been a terrible tragedy. But anyway, thanks for joining again, Ghost. I'll probably see you again on this program in the near future.
Awesome, man. Love being here. Great conversation. Yeah, these past two shows have been a lot of fun. So appreciate you letting me come here and be autistic.
Yeah, man. I was just going to say, I always feel a little bit more autistic after we have one of these conversations. And, that just is what it is. It's neither good nor bad.
Yep,
but I choose to embrace
it. It's
autistic.
Yeah.
Yep, it just is what it is. All right, guys. I am going to outro with the intro. And until next time, remember, the war is a story. The story is a war. Act accordingly.
We were sleeping. I've been sleeping. I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face. There is a wound that won't heal at the center of the galaxy. There is a darkness reaching like rust into everything around us. We let it grow, and now it's here.
How many men have you killed, Merlin?
I don't know.
50? 100? Countless.
Countless has a nice ring to it.
And how many lives have you saved?
500,000. Population of King's Landing. Tell me if your precious Randy commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then?
Our time has come. We prepared. We grew stronger. Were you rested in your cradle of power? You were trusted to lead the Republic. But you were deceived. You assumed no force could challenge you. And now, finally, we have returned.
The visions are clear now. I see possible futures all at once. Our enemies are all around us. And in so many futures they prevail. But I do see a way. There is a narrow way through.
It's not a prophecy. It's a story that you keep telling, but it's not their story, it's yours. They deserve to be led by one of their own. What your people did to this world is heartbreaking.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope! We have survived by hiding from them, by running from them. But they are the gatekeepers. They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such time, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
Forgive me. I did not see. I have failed you all. You will bring me. John, I do not know what strengthens my heart. I swear to you I will not let the White City fall. Our people fail. Our people. Our people.
I wish you good fortune in the wars to come. And now it begins.
No. Now it ends.